A young boy named Liu Di was sitting on a stool across from a not-so-young fortune teller. He wondered how many years he would live. The soothsayer said something completely different, that in 3 days his right eye would start seeing again, and asked why he needed to know about the time he had left. To this, Liu Di replied that his right eye is not his real eye, and added that he lost it 3 years ago while trying to save someone. The guy didn't believe the prediction, and was about to leave. At that moment, he received a message on his cell phone. The report said that the disease that caused Liu Di to lose sight in his right eye could develop in his left eye within a few years. The doctor also said that there is no cure yet, but urged the guy not to worry and to believe in the development of technology. After reading the message, Liu Di thanked the soothsayer, saying that he would take his words as a blessing. Distancing himself from the soothsayer, he added that becoming blind at a young age was like dying, so he would prefer death to such a life. At this moment, sparks literally sprang from the young man's right eye. The sudden pain made the guy stop, one hand covering his eye and the other holding onto the bench to keep from falling off his feet. Liu Di, covering his eye, most of all did not want to believe that he could go blind right now. The pain did not recede. He clenched his teeth and sat down on the bench, holding his head with his hand. Suddenly, a certain interface appeared in front of Liu Di's eyes, announcing that the regeneration was complete and that the process of fusing the nerves to the brain was beginning. The guy opened his eyes abruptly. Opening his eyes, the guy saw that now when he looked at people within a certain radius, some sort of window of information appeared next to them. Liu Di was shocked by this new ability. He stood there with his mouth open in astonishment, and the only question swirling around in his head was what had just happened. A moment later, the image of a small boy appeared in front of him, upside down. Liu Di was startled and jumped back and fell on the bench. He shouted, thinking that he had seen a ghost or was hallucinating from the pain. The boy said hello and introduced himself as Mo Tong. He said that he was an artificial intelligence located in his right eye, and that he was the only model capable of thinking independently. Mo Tong said that he couldn't explain everything in detail right now, and pointed his finger in a direction. Liu Di could not come to his senses. Mo Tong pointed his finger at the red-haired girl in the purple dress and claimed that she was in danger. A picture appeared before Liu Di's eyes. A girl walking straight ahead as a pen suddenly falls from somewhere above. The girl slips on the handle and falls. In her fall, the girl hits her head on a billboard and it starts falling on top of her. Suddenly, Liu Di realized that the situation he had just witnessed hadn't happened yet. Noticing the falling pen, the guy lunged sharply in its direction. Jumping, Liu Di caught the pen right in the air, literally a meter away from the girl. Clutching the pen, the guy asked Mo Tong what had happened. He replied that he had modeled the situation in Liu Di's head, based on the available data. The guy compared it to predicting the future, but Mo Tong objected, saying that it was just a prediction based on the available information. Mo Tong sensed something and said that people with destructive energy were approaching them. A group of athletic-looking men in black business suits got out of the cars that had just pulled up. They walked towards Liu Di. Liu Di stood there without moving as the group of people in suits shortened their distance with him. The guy asked who they were. Mo Tong noticed that the men were quite strong. Mo Tong said that the men's biographies were classified and that they were rumored to be members of military groups. The cars in which they arrived, he said, belonged to Inji's company. Suddenly, Liu Di's right eye began to sparkle again. From the interface windows, Liu Di understood that the system itself was analyzing the body and mobilizing all the necessary resources. However, he still couldn't fully believe that it could change his body. One of the men approached Liu Di and said that his boss was looking to meet a guy and pointed to one of the cars. Liu Di smiled while looking at the man. The man asked the boy to follow him. Liu Di opened the car door and entered the cabin. Liu Di's eye began to sparkle again, and the interface notified that the system was analyzing the aesthetic taste of the person opposite and adjusting his facial expression based on the data. A young, long-haired blonde woman in a formal suit sat in front of the guy. Liu Di sat across from the girl with a tense face, waiting for what was in store for him next. The girl broke the silence by asking where Liu Di had been missing for 3 years. A look of shock froze on the boy's face. Liu Di remembered how he had defended this girl unarmed from armed robbers 3 years ago. The interface showed that Liu Di's muscles had more than doubled in strength, and her face was taking on the most appropriate expression. The lamp in the car illuminated the girl from above. She called herself Yanqing Wen and confirmed that it was her boyfriend who had saved her 3 years ago. Also, the girl complimented Liu Di on his good looks. Liu Di asked Mo Tong what was wrong with his face, to which the latter replied that he had changed the guy's facial features, and now he pretty much conforms to beauty ideals. After gaining confidence, Liu Di still asked again if he was the one who had saved her. Yanqing Wen apologized and explained that she had been looking for the boyfriend for 3 years and had secretly come to see him to avoid media publicity. She promised to repay him for his help. Liu Di's eyes sparkled, and the interface notified him that the system had started analyzing the information on his interlocutor. From the data provided by the system, Liu Di learned the girl's age and physical parameters, as well as her major, degree, and field of study. The guy asked how exactly Yanqing Wen wanted to repay him, to which the girl replied that although he had saved her life, but to expect that he could get anything was not worth it, and offered him money. At this moment, Yanqing Wen received a call from her father. Her father asked her if she'd found her savior. She replied that she had found her savior, and that she would decide everything on her own. But her father disagreed, and told her to bring the boy to him. After that, the man asked for the phone. Yanqing Wen told Liu Di that he would need to meet with one person. The boy asked who exactly. The girl replied that Liu Di was to meet her father. Guy realized that she had received a call from Yan Hongxin, the richest man in Shanghai. Liu Di replied to the girl that he accepts the invitation with great respect. On the way to the mansion, Liu Di asked Yanqing Wen why she was so cold to him even though he had saved her life. The girl responded by explaining that ever since she was a child, people in her environment had always had bad intentions toward her. Liu Di put his hands behind his head and leaned back in the seat. The guy remembered how he had recently saved a girl, and how he had been invited to walk to Yanqing Wen's car. He mentally asked Mo Tong who he was and where he came from. Mo Tong replied that he was a Type 3 computer with weak artificial intelligence, and his mind was equivalent to an 8-year-old child. In doing so, it can take full advantage of the internet and computing programs. Mo Tong doesn't know anything about his appearance other than the fact that he also has a code name, Emperor 9, in his code. Liu Di noticed that his muscles had grown by more than 5 times. Mo Tong confirmed this and said that he could have strengthened the guy even more if he had more protein in his body. The girl crossed her arms on her chest and indignantly asked Liu Di what he was doing. The guy replied that he was bored and that he was going to read a book. He tried to reassure the girl with a smile and said that he had no plans to marry her. Yanqing Wen, embarrassed, thought that Liu Di was smiling very sweetly. The guy opened the book and started flipping through the pages. The interface notified him that the fast reading function was on. Liu Di was surprised and asked Mo Tong what was going on. Meanwhile, the fast data analysis skill was almost loaded. The guy started flipping through the pages with great speed. Yanqing Wen admonished Liu Di that books should not be disrespected like this, even if you don't like to read. The guy tried to guffaw that he likes to use paper fans. Liu Di smiled. The girl, on the other hand, was clearly displeased. The action takes place in the Yan family's huge mansion. The twin girls were standing at the entrance. One of them complained that their father, despite the heat, had asked them to meet the guest outside. The other, agreeing, added that she didn't understand why he had been invited at all. Their other sister said their father had his reasons and suggested they wait for a guest. The blonde man next to her added that he would teach him a lesson if he was disrespectful. A car pulled up to the entrance of the estate. Yanqing Wen started to get out of the car. The guy and girl got out of the car and stood in front of the entrance to the manor. The twins, upon seeing Liu Di, praised his looks with one voice. The interface started showing Liu Di information about the girls. One of them was called Yan Kai Kai. She graduated from the police academy and works as a private detective. The second was named Yan Xing. She is a graduate student at a conservatory and a popular internet host. Looking at them, Liu Di asked how could there be 2 such beautiful girls at the same time. The twins were thrilled with the guy and responded that he knows how to be honest. Mo Tong couldn't analyze their behavior and said he couldn't understand human emotions. Yanqing Wen introduced her older sister Yanyi Wen to Liu Di. She was the last to introduce her brother-in-law, Fung Yu. The man extended his hand to Liu Di in greeting. As they shook hands, Mo Tong noticed that Liu Di's heartbeat increased. He assumed that it was his body's reaction to stress. The guy asked Mo Tong to himself what he meant. Mo Tong replied that from the looks of it, Fung Yu was angry with Liu Di. The man, on the other hand, was smiling at this moment. Mo Tong told Liu Di that the man was 38 years old, a foreigner, and an archery master. Liu Di asked Mo Tong what the hostility could be related to which the latter replied that Fung Yu perceives the guy as a competitor in the fight for the Yan family's shares. The man put his hand on Liu Di's shoulder and told him that they were now family and he could contact him with any questions. Mo Tong reported that Fung Yu was lying. Liu Di said with a friendly smile that the man was exaggerating and they couldn't be considered a family. Yanqing Wen said there are 5 of them in the family in total, but one of the sisters named Yanxi Wen is currently abroad. Liu Di remembered who the girl was talking about. Yanxi Wen is quite a popular actress. Yanqing Wen introduced the Yan family's twins, Kai Kai and Xing, to Liu Di. The embarrassed girls told the guy he could just address them by their first names. Smiling sweetly, Liu Di replied that it was nice to meet them too. Yanyi Wen told the guy that the table was already set, however, their father hadn't arrived yet, so she suggested that he take a look around the manor. Fung Yu put his arm around Liu Di's shoulder and suggested that he shoot a bow. The guy accepted Fung Yu's challenge. Everyone headed towards the firing range. Fung Yu told Liu Di that he had won 6 world archery championships, but now he was just an amateur. The man asked Liu Di if he knew how to shoot a bow, and that he could teach him. Mo Tong's interface reported that he had loaded the archery skill, and now the guy was able to defeat Fung Yu. Liu Di replied that he knew how to shoot a little and suggested a competition. The twins warned that Fung Yu was a good archer, but Liu Di promised that he wouldn't hit the dirt. Fung Yu agrees to the contest. Yan Kai suggested introducing a punishment for the loser of the duel. Fung Yu agreed to the girl's proposed punishment of eating something upside down. Liu Di also agreed to the new condition. Fung Yu was the first to grab his bow. The man drew the bowstring and prepared to fire. Fung Yu released an arrow. Fung Yu's arrow hit the bullseye. Yanqing began to enthusiastically praise Fung Yu's shooting skills. Liu Di asked if he would be considered a winner if he hit a farther target. Yan Kai told Liu Di that his bow was very heavy, and her sister added that even Fung Yu couldn't handle such a heavy bow. Fung Yu confirmed that with this bow, Liu Di would definitely not be able to hit the target. Liu Di replied that since they were so confident that he couldn't release the arrow, they could have a bet. The guy asked Fung Yu if he had the courage to stand in front of the target. Laughing, the man agreed and went to the target. Liu Di reached for an arrow. Taking the arrow in his hands, the boy drew the bowstring and began to aim. Liu Di asked the twins if the sight of blood made them feel sick. Liu Di was aiming at the target that Fung Yu was standing next to. The guy let go of the arrow. The arrow flew a few centimeters away from Fung Yu's neck, catching his hair. The man was shocked. Liu Di's arrow hit the bullseye. Fung Yu's legs went under from fright and he fell down. Yan Kai ran to the man, and Xing told Liu Di that the man had gone too far, and that she should inform Yi Wen to chase the guy away. Liu Di replied with a nonchalant face that it was just a competition. Fung Yu walked up to the guy and said that there was nothing wrong. They just wanted to compete. Taking Liu Di by the shoulder, the man praised the guy's shooting skills. Mo Tong reported that Fung Yu was under a lot of stress and was afraid of conflict. The man said there was enough competition for the day and suggested lunch. Mo Tong reported that just now, Fung Yu had broken the iron arrow in his hand out of anger. There were plates of various appetizing dishes on the table. Li Di and the entire Yan family, with the exception of the father of the family, gathered around the table. Looking at Fung Yu, the guy wondered if the man had supernatural powers. Liu Di assumed that the man had once practiced witchcraft. An elderly man walked into the dining hall. The interface confirmed that it was Yan Hongxin, the chairman of Ying Yi Group and the richest man in Shanghai. Yanqing Wen and Fung Yu stood up from their seats to greet the man. Yan Hongxin said hello to Liu Di and complimented his looks. The guy said hello in return. Taking his seat, the head of the family invited everyone to the table. Yan Hongxin apologized to Liu Di that it took him 3 years to find him. He also asked if the guy had heard anything about his family and company. Liu Di scratched his head and replied that he hadn't heard much. Yan Hongxin began to explain that he had invited the guy here to offer him to be his adopted son. Liu Di was very surprised and asked again if he understood the question correctly. Fung Yu was very indignant at such a suggestion from Yan Hongxin. He walked over to the man and urged him to think it over again. Liu Di guessed that Fung Yu was actually afraid that he would take away the Yan family's shares. Yan Hongxin said that the decision is final and that he wants to accept Liu Di as his son. Kai protested. Yanqing Wen supported her sister, saying that even though Liu Di had saved her, they shouldn't repay him in this way. Yan Hongxin replied that their family owed a lot to the guy, after all. He lost his eye to save Qing Wen, and these 3 years the guy had gone through a lot. Qing Wen froze in surprise. Liu Di thought about how to explain to him that there was nothing wrong with his eye now, and in addition, he had superpowers. Mo Tong informed Liu Di that when he was strengthening the guy's muscles, he had used up almost all of his body's resources. Therefore, he recommended that he eat immediately. Liu Di took a leg from the table and began to eat it greedily. Xing was surprised at such an appetite of Liu Di. Kai said that obviously her father was telling the truth about the guy's miserable existence. Yan Hongxin ordered the butler to bring more water for the guest. Liu Di continued to eat one piece of meat after another. Mo Tong said that the nutrients were being consumed, and his physical condition continued to improve. Fung Yu gave a sly smirk. The man stood up and walked over to Yan Hongxin and offered him a taste of the 1982 collection wine he had asked his old acquaintance for. Fung Yu leaned over to his father-in-law and said that since Liu Di was born in poverty, he had few virtues, so he would inevitably bring shame on the Yan family. He offered to just give the guy some money and let him spend time in their company. Fung Yu announced the start of the tasting, but without Liu Di, as he was definitely not used to tasting such delights. Liu Di parried that the wine Fung Yu is offering is just a way to profit from the rich. Yan Hongxin passed the word to Liu Di. The guy explained that this 82 Lafite wine is expensive only because there was a severe drought in the region where it was produced that year, which affected its rarity and price. Liu Di also added that due to the drought, the grapes were bad unripe that year, so the quality of the wine also leaves much to be desired. From himself, he recommended the 1990 wines, Fung Yu said that Liu Di was talking nonsense. The guy replied that he had not tasted the wine himself and asked if Fung Yu had tasted it himself. Liu Di reminded the man who won today's archery competition. Fung Yu became nervous and his forehead covered in sweat. Liu Di waved his hands and said that it was just a joke. Yan Hongxin asked the guy what he knew about China's economy. He replied that in 2023, China's economy entered a new era and underwent changes in 3 areas. Yanqing Wen swept up that Liu Di's remarks were not superficial in nature. The girl wondered what kind of person Liu Di was. Yan Hongqing asked the guy what he thought of his company. Liu Di apologized and said that he was not interested in becoming the Yan family's adopted son. Liu Di's right eye sparkled. Yan Hongxin looked at the guy in surprise, while Fung Yu was reading the message at this moment. In his text, he was instructed to kill Liu Di within a month and gain control of Yanqing Liang. The guy intercepting the message was surprised that someone wanted to kill him, but why would anyone want to deal with Yanqing Liang? Liu Di said that he didn't want to be Yan Hongxin's adopted son. He continued and mumbled that he seemed to have his eye on his daughter, pointing his finger at Yanqing Wen. Qing Wen jumped up from her seat and asked what kind of nonsense brother Liu Di was talking about now. The girl asked for support from her father, but Yan Hongxin laughed and told his daughter that it was normal for young people to fall in love, and he understood. Liu Di added that he doesn't aim to get into Yan's family, and he just wants to have a good job, and to be close to Yanqing Wen to take care of her. To this, the girl exclaimed that there were plenty of decent guys around her and he was not allowed to call her his girlfriend. Yan Hongxin resented this behavior of his daughter and asked her not to behave like this, to which Qing Wen resentfully said, "Father." Yan Hongxin told Liu Di that whatever job he chooses, choose it, and he will support his choice, because no one can interfere with that one's life. Liu Di said that to be closer to Yanqing Wen, he could be her driver. Everyone in the audience was surprised by such a choice of profession, because the guy had the opportunity to get any decent job. Yan Hongxin agreed to let him be the driver, but he cautioned that if Liu Di wanted to be a driver, he had to live in their estate and be on call 24 hours a day. Liu Di agreed, and afterwards thought that it seemed Mr. Yan wasn't going to give up his idea of adopting him, and he didn't want the people he was trying to save to be endangered by nasty people again. Yanqing Wen couldn't believe how Liu Di could say such a thing. She thought that even for her father, it was too much, because he had turned the situation to his advantage, and her feelings were completely disregarded. Yan Xingxing said that Liu Di had succeeded and would now live in their house. She added that Liu Di had made their sister very angry, and they needed to find a way to get rid of him. Yan Hongxin said that it was decided and let Liu Di become Qing Wen's driver. Hongxin held out a golden card and said that despite all the events, Liu Di was still under his family's protection. He prepared a small gift for him as a token of gratitude and waited for him to accept it. The eyes of Ouyang Fung Yu full of envy looked at him in front, and the eyes of the Yan sisters full of disdain looked at him from behind. He needs money. But if he takes it, how will he be able to be in the Yan family normally in the future? Liu Di said that he didn't need their money and he saved Qing Wen not out of a desire for profit, but out of conscience. Ouyang Fung Yu thought that he just wasn't enough and wanted to marry Yanqing Wen and seize power over the Yan family, and really that one was only interested in money and women. Yan Hongxin said that there wasn't much money on the card, only 5 million, and with his talents, he could easily earn the money himself. He asked to accept the money because his conscience was bothering him. Liu Di couldn't understand how it was possible to not take the 5 million. Motong asked if he needed the money, why he kept silent all this time. Liu Di replied to the one that there was no time. Suddenly, something started to happen. Motong asked him not to worry. The data was being downloaded and he would have to wait for a while. He successfully registered an account for international coal trading. His current account increased, and Liu Di asked what was happening. Motong replied that he had just set up a coal trading account for him to increase his income. He would buy coal at a low price and then quickly sell it at several times the price. Tong used literally seconds to resell it. The butler respectfully turned to Liu and asked him to simply accept the money. His master was a kind man. If he didn't accept his help, he would most likely blame himself for the rest of his life. Liu Di agreed and said he would do anything to make Mr. Yan feel good. He didn't need his money now. In just a few minutes, his account was replenished by 5 million yuan. The twins grudgingly discussed Liu not accepting the money, forcing their father to offer him more. Yan Hongxin laughed and told Qing Wen to take Liu Di to the mall today. After all, a Yan family member should always look good. The butler led the master of the manor away to his chambers. Liu Di now had a 5 million gold card and another 5 million in his personal account. Liu Di thought that compared to the Yan family, who was used to living large, he still preferred to live a simple and independent life. Something from the side caught the guy's attention. The twins addressed Liu Di as a sponger and said that their sister was already waiting for him downstairs and let him go down to her. Liu Di accepted Mrs. Kai Kai and Mrs. Chin Chin's assignment. The twins languidly said that the damn guy was handsome after all. Liu Di was amazed to see such a huge garage with lots of cool cars. The guy tapped on the glass of one of the cars. Yanqing Wen lowered the glass and asked what the man was doing. Liu Di suggested that we take a different car today. Yanqing Wen said that one is just a driver, and no one gave him the right to choose. Liu Di said that he wanted to drive the red car and let the girl get in. Liu Di said thoughtfully, wondering if he would ever have the chance to drive such a sports car before he went blind. Yanqing Wen imagined how Liu Di would collect alms in the future, and her heart softened. Qing Wen agreed. Let it be as Liu Di wants it to be. The people in the gray car asked if Liu Di could drive sports cars. Fung Yu asked if he had driven such a car, and afterward offered to teach him. Liu Di looked at them worriedly. After all, he had never driven such cars before. Motong set up the sports car manual. Liu Di mentally thanked the assistant. Liu Di chuckled and said that he was right, and it would be his first time driving such a car. Fung Yu wished him good luck, and said that in that case, he would drive on. Fung Yu laughed and told his wife that he just didn't seem to notice him. Yanqing Wen asked if Liu Di even knows how to drive, because he has been just holding the steering wheel for 3 minutes. Liu Di assured her that everything was under control, and there was no need to worry. He pressed the gas pedal and the car started moving. Liu Di began to chase at a tremendous speed. Yanqing Wen said that one went crazy while holding tightly onto the handrail. Motong said that statistics say that handsome drivers are 12% easier to get girls at first sight. Liu Di replied that he would try his best to look his best. Liu Di made a sharp turn and Qing Wen almost flew to the other side of the cabin. Fung Yu noticed that he was still trying to overtake him. Fung Yu shifted another gear so that the car could reach a higher speed. Liu Di noticed that Fung Yu's car was rapidly receding and gaining speed. Yanqing Wen told her husband that she definitely didn't want to be in an accident. Yanqing Wen couldn't understand why Fung Yu was so irritable lately. In the underground parking lot of Henmao Qing Wen Shopping Center, Qing Wen cursed. Liu Di asked Motong if this 12% chance of love at first sight didn't work. He replied that instead of love, she wanted to kill him. The guards asked Yanqing Wen if she was okay because she was trying to move the car with her bare hands. Mong found information about the leader of the guard. It was TC, 30 years old, an orphan, adopted by Mr. Yan. Now he was the Yan family's bodyguard. He had threatened Liu. If he tried to harm Madame, he would have to deal with them. Mong counted the bodyguards. There were 30 in total. Liu Di was trying to figure out just how many people Mr. Yan had adopted. Yanqing Wen told TC not to argue with the guy. After all, he is on good terms with his father. Yanqing Wen went forward and called Liu Di over. After all, they had clothes to buy. Liu Di pondered, and this time he was too impulsive. He didn't think about what she wanted, so next time he wouldn't be able to offer her anything. People on the street were watching the Yan family's bodyguards and discussing the couple walking together. Liu Di and Qin Wen walked into a store with luxury clothes. Qing Wen said they are on the spot and let the guy pick out clothes. Liu Di said he wouldn't, because he didn't like it there. Yanqing Wen said it is LVV and how can he not like it? Liu Di said it sucks. She asked if he liked the store. He again answered in the negative. Yanqing Wen couldn't stand it and shouted that he was going overboard on purpose. The girl said that he made her mad. Liu Di asked her to stop acting like she was already his wife because he didn't promise to marry her. Liu Di took Yanqing Wen's hand and dragged her behind him. Qing Wen asked where he was taking her, and Liu Di said they were going to pick out clothes. Yanqing Wen asked if he definitely wanted to buy clothes from this store. The one replied positively, and Qing Wen said that the average price for an item is less than 500, and he will be laughed at when he comes out in it, and her father will blame her for it. Liu Di called out an acquaintance by name, Ajia. The guy asked Liu Di if Liu Di was in front of him. Ajia said that 3 years had passed, and asked where he had been missing. Liu Di said he came here to take care of his affairs, and Jia said that things won't change from his results, and that's all Li Li. Liu Di remembered that Ajia had a crush on Sun Li Li back in university. She was studying off campus back then, but never gave Ajia a chance. He never imagined before that he would have supernatural abilities, and 3 years later, Ajia would become a salesman in a clothing store, and Jia told Li Li to see who came to them. Li Li asked who was there and wondered if he wanted to get the goods himself. Li Li walked out and finally noticed Liu Di. Li Li approached him and asked him if he had become rich, because the things in their store were not cheap by the standards of ordinary people. Li Li asked if the girl standing beside him was his. Yanqing Wen objected and said that he was just her driver. Li Li disappointedly asked if he was the driver inside. Li Li told Ajia to take at least 300 yuan to Liu Di, because she thought Liu Di wouldn't be able to afford it. And Jia apologized for the girl who was in a bad mood. He said if he wanted to try something on, he'd bring it. He wouldn't change himself and their unchanging trio. And Jia said he knew exactly what he liked better than anyone else. Yanqing Wen wondered which unchanging trio Ajia was referring to. in the fitting room. The girls in the fitting room were discussing how handsome Liu Di was. Yanqing Wen saw the one coming out of the fitting room. A satisfied Liu Di walked out of the fitting room wearing his new clothes. Li counted the purchase amount. Shirt, 368 yuan. Pants, 400 yuan. Shoes, 330 yuan. Yanqing Wen noticed that the things looked very good, and they were also inexpensive. Liu Di asked if Ajia would get some percentage of his purchase. Li asked what he would like the commission to be given out. Liu Di said to pack 3 dresses, which is 200 yuan each. Li and Ajia were astonished, and Jia asked if he should pack his dresses. Liu Di said to pack up and added that he was willing to buy them even for 200,000 yuan. Since the last time Mo Tong helped him make money in the stock market, he now has 34 million on his card. Yanqing Wen thought that finally this guy had finally woken up his conscience. Otherwise his father's money was just gathering dust. That's it. Liu Di was picking out lighters and asked to wrap one up. The saleswoman said it was a limited edition collection in their store. A diamond lighter in red, weighing 2 carats and priced at 0.3 million yuan, and then asked if he was sure of his choice. Liu Di held out the card and said he was buying. The saleswoman happily agreed to accept the order. Yanqing Wen asked if the guy was crazy. After all, the shirt cost 300 yuan and the lighter cost 1 million yuan. Liu Di wondered if she knew that he smoked. That's what he needs a lighter for. Liu Di said that there must be something unique about a man. It's called taking the bus to a restaurant, saving what needs saving, and spending what needs spending. The saleswoman narrated that the payment was successful, and Liu Di thanked the girl. When they were leaving, Liu Di asked Qing Wen to wait because he had some more things to buy. Yanqing Wen didn't understand how such a girl could be made to wait for a long time. 10 minutes later, Liu Di approached her with 2 ice creams. Liu Di held out 1 ice cream to Qing Wen. Yanqing Wen noticed that his lips were stained with ice cream and told the guy about it. Liu Di licked his lips and asked if he had cleaned up the leftover ice cream. Yanqing Wen warned that if she became ill, it was his responsibility. Qing Wen hesitantly licked the ice cream. She liked the flavor of the ice cream extremely well. Liu Di told her that she didn't really need to make such a stern face. She was a girl, and thus should look a little kinder. A girl approached them and said she had finally found them. Liu Di turned around at the voice. Li said that although they are former classmates, they don't know much about each other. Li asked why don't they add each other as friends, so that when he gets bored late at night, they can chat. Liu Di asked if she had Seitu Yang's contacts. Li said if he added her, she would give him contacts. Li saw a message from the mobile bank. Your account has been replenished with 234,500. Current balance 123,005,323 yuan. She thought, is he really that rich? There was a new message on my phone. Li said they will now always be in touch. Yanqing Wen said that they should hurry back and pick up the clothes he bought, and they still had things to do. Liu Di didn't understand why she was taking him away so quickly. Liu Di didn't understand what the girl was so angry about. Mo Tong said that he thought she was just jealous. Li definitely wanted to win over Liu Di, a handsome young man with lots of money. Li was lying on her bed and texting Liu Di. She wrote that she knows his ex-girlfriend, but Xiao Yan now has a new rich boyfriend. Li offered to just talk, and Liu Di deleted her from his friends. Li threw the phone on the floor out of frustration. Kai said, wondering what kind of clothes Brother Liu bought and how much it all cost her sister. Xin revealed that she had an idea on how to deal with Liu Di. The action takes place in Haishu, north of Wanghai district. Qing Wen asked why Liu Di had brought her here. Yanqing Wen asked if he wanted to remind her that she owed him for that incident 3 years ago, and that he almost lost his life because of her. Liu Di called her a baby and said her idea was too boring. Yanqing Wen followed him and shouted that no one allowed him to call her that. Liu Di opened the doors to the building. In front of them were bunks with sick people. Qing Wen thought it looked like a scene from a horror movie. Yanqing Wen asked Liu Di what this place was. They noticed movement inside the room. The old man stood with an iron stake over the boy's body. The girl shrieked at the sight. The old man told Liu Di to put Qing Wen away, and she shut up. After all, he was here saving people. Yanqing Wen said that the guy has pleural effusion and thus does not help him. No medical supplies, no sterilization, such irresponsibility. The old man said if she had medical knowledge, then let her tie him up later. Afterward, he turned to Liu Di and asked if he had brought him some wine. The old man once again asked if he had brought wine. Liu Di told Master Tu that he had made money. Yanqing Wen couldn't understand the relationship between Brother Liu and this old man. Half an hour later, Liu Di was saying goodbye to Master Tu. They got into the car and started driving. Master Tu told Liu Di to remember to bring him some wine next time. The children also said goodbye to Liu Di and Qing Wen. Yanqing Wen asked what kind of place it was. Liu Di said that it was a simple hospital and that man was the only doctor there. He treats poor people who cannot afford hospital treatment. Qing Wen asked what about those children. Liu Di said that they were all growing up without parents, so Master Tu had taken them in. Yanqing Wen asked how he met this master. Liu Di said that 3 years ago when he lost his eye, Master Tu saved him from death. Yanqing Wen clasped her hands and apologized to Liu Di. Liu Di said that if she feels guilty, why doesn't she make it up to him by sleeping with him tonight? Yanqing Wen shouted that he was a jerk. Liu Di laughed and said he was joking, which made the girl even angrier. Yanqing Wen said that she noticed that Master Liu's hospital was short of money. Liu Di said that he definitely needed her help. He gave him a few 100,000 yuan. Qing Wen asked if he had given all the money, and Liu Di said it was not her concern. Night came and the boys arrived at the estate. Kai ran up with Xin to the car, and happily noticed that her sister had returned. Xin casually called Liu Di cute and narrated that they had prepared his room and gave him the key. Liu Di thanked the guy. Motong said that the twins had good intentions for him. Yanqing Wen was surprised that the sisters were able to pack so quickly and asked what floor their room was now on. Kong replied that they were now on the basement floor, in the farthest room. Yanqing Wen asked, "Are they the ones talking about the basement?" Xin told her sister not to forget that he was the driver, and it wasn't hard for them to let him stay in the suite. Qing Wen offered to start over. Liu Di thanked them for having a roof over his head, and afterwards said that if he was no longer needed, he would go to rest. As they walked, one of the twins said that the important thing was that he didn't cheat on their big sister. Liu Di was coming down the stairs. Liu Di said that he didn't think this manor had such a long corridor on the last 2 floors. Motong asked if the guy could see the camera. Liu Di said that the twins are probably somewhere watching his suffering from the plasma screen right now. Xin noticed from the cameras that Liu Di was already in the hallway. She had already prepared for the performance. Xin told Kai that it was very bad of them, but she's really looking forward to it. Xin couldn't understand why the light bulb in the hallway had lit up. Liu Di stepped over the stretched rope. Liu Di dodged the balls flying at him. The twins couldn't believe how he had preempted the attack. They realized that this time he could dodge it. The cameras turned off and the sisters could no longer watch Liu Di. Liu Di carried a bowl of water. Liu Di said that the sisters were even able to come up with such an interesting prank. Motong said that the reaction speed was increased by 354%, the reaction speed of 3 seconds. Liu Di walked into the room and said he didn't think it was a basement and it might be a little damp. Liu Di noticed a piano right in front of him. The guy said that when he was a kid he dreamed of being a pianist. Motong said that the basic knowledge of classical music is loaded. The works of modern pop singers are studied. Liu Di asked if he did all this so that he could fulfill his childhood dream. Liu Di began to sing that on days of great upheaval, the wind howled, but they were not afraid. He continued, "Let the seawater go. Let the strong winds pass." He experienced dark night winds and heavy rains. Kept singing, flapping the wings of the night with the rippling waves outside. "I'm thinking on a high level." He continued, "The direction of the wind, the continuation of the night, and the end of the blooming of the flowers depend on me." Motong remarked that sounds very good, and his artistic ability beyond human reasoning. The process was successfully uploaded. Liu Di asked what the man had just done. Motong grinned and said that it was a pity that such a beautiful song had to be listened to alone. He made a video of it and put it on the internet. Liu Di was annoyed that there was nothing he could do against him. Liu Di remarked, "Liu Di's brother is a very interesting time." A new notification arrived on his phone. Liu Di couldn't understand what was going on. Videos of him singing have racked up millions of views. The enthusiastic comments were plentiful. Many commercial companies invited him into their projects. Liu Di realized that in the era of social networking, the power of this community should not be underestimated. Liu Di said that show business is so complicated. Liu Di wanted to fulfill his longtime dream of starting his own business if he could. Xin pondered, winding circles around the room as to why, out of all the traps she had set, Liu Di hadn't stepped on a single one. Xin called Kai to come with her to the 2nd floor. She wanted to see the evil Liu brother. But the girl didn't react, and Xin asked what the girl was looking at and why she wasn't listening. Xin asked what was the big deal about that video of Liu Di singing. Kai held out Xin's earpiece and offered to listen to how nice his voice was. Kai remarked in surprise that it sounded very good and not bad. Xin wanted to know who he was. Kai said she doesn't know. He hides his real name. He only does music. His name is Di Yi, and he has 6 million subscribers. Xin said she wanted to marry him. Kai replied that she was the one who found him and yelled at her not to steal her husband. Xin shouted that she wasn't the one who found him and she wouldn't marry, only him. Yan Hongxin couldn't fall asleep because of the noise of the girls, he thought. Can't one have a proper sleep at a time like this? They are so loud. Liu Di's stomach rumbled. He was hungry. Right now, even simple reflection was taking all his energy. Liu Di got up from the table and went to the kitchen to get some food. Liu Di opened the door. Someone pepper sprayed him in the face. Liu Di fell down and shouted out, "What is she doing? After all, this is his room." The girls were puzzled, for the boy was right. Xin shouted that the one was shameless and had a conscience to stay in their house. Liu Di added that he was still living on their money. Xin had warned him, she told him, But Liu Di didn't listen to her and left. Xin told him not to dare go to their big sister's room. Xin didn't understand how this was possible. Kai was surprised at the guy's behavior. Liu Di was preparing a dish of vegetables. Motong rushed to the rescue and produced a Michelin 3-star chef-level cooking skill download. Liu Di thanked the assistant. The twins were surprised that Liu Di could also cook. Xin told Kai to just cook the food and they would charge him for the food he spent if he thought of anything bad against them. He started chopping celery. Liu Di was whipping eggs for a future culinary masterpiece. Xin watched Liu Di's masterful cooking mesmerized. Xin tried to calm down and not give in to this beautiful man's devious plan. Xin tried to admonish Kai to remember what they were here for. Kai remembered that they needed to chase this guy away. He poured it into a plate. The twins looked at the dish Liu Di had prepared with admiration. It was fried rice and egg. Liu Di asked the girls if they wanted to taste the hot dish. Xin interrupted her sister, who was about to agree, and said that they weren't hungry. Liu Di brought a spoonful of fresh rice to his mouth. Liu Di appreciated the dish and said that it was not bad. The rice was slightly crunchy on the teeth. The aroma of the onions complemented the flavor nicely, and altogether it created an incredible tandem of taste. Liu Di asked if they wanted to try the dish. Xin said she couldn't hold back. Kang said she would eat fried rice with egg and asked her to forgive her. Liu Di remarked that they are like children. The twins ate every last crumb. Xin said they can't eat this food for free. One bowl of his rice is 10,000 yuan. Kai added that he still owes them more than 4 million. Liu Di asked why he hadn't seen Ouyang's brother-in-law today. Xin said that her sister and her husband have their own house and live there. Liu Di said, "That means there are only 3 silly girls here." Xin and Kai asked what Liu Di was talking about. Liu Di asked the girls why they were interested. Liu Di warned that they had better be careful, especially at night. The twins asked why he was saying it so seriously. Liu Di stood on the roof and watched the moon. It was already very late, and it was night outside. Liu Di used his super ability, and he wondering what the relationship between Ouyang and Yanqing Wen was. Liu Di pondered. It was easy to guess that Yanqing Wen was Ouyang's direct competitor in the struggle to control the Yan family's resources. He wondered if it could be that Ouyang wanted to kill Qing Wen. Motong assured him that Yan Manor was under his personal control. If there was any danger, he would inform him immediately. Liu Di asked him to keep an eye on Ouyang. Motong said he could, but the question was whether he had cameras in his house. But he can say for sure that he had nothing to do today, and now he decided to have some fun. A vulgar sight opened before him. The girls on the bed with him were annoying Fung Yu, saying what a bad guy he was. Fung Yu said he would teach Kai and Xing a lesson. Sooner or later he would become the master of the Yan family. He would have to make them serve him well. Oh, Yan Fung Yu asked the girl to kiss him. Liu Di thought that Fung Yu was acting like an animal. He married his older sister, and still thinks like that about his 2 younger sisters. Yanqing Wen didn't understand why Brother Liu hadn't come down yet. Tai Sai told Madam that he knocked on Mr. Liu's door twice, but he didn't seem to be awake yet. Afterward, he offered to walk the girl out today. Yanqing Ming said, "Let the guy do his duties. Just because he's her chauffeur doesn't give him the right to be late." She ordered him to knock on the door until he woke up. Yanqing Wen asked the bodyguard who was about to run an errand to wait. Liu Di ran towards Qing Wen. The girl wondered if he had gone jogging. Liu Di brought out the buns and gave them to Qing Wen. He said that he had spent an hour to get to a popular bakery in the city. Yanqing Wen said that this bakery was 20 kilometers away from their home and asked if he had run that distance in an hour. Yanqing Wen asked if he thought that the morning run was still enough to justify him being late. The bodyguard was told over the earpiece that Liu Di had been followed the whole time, and he had indeed run 20 kilometers round trip in an hour. Tai Zi praised the guy, for his physical fitness is admirable. Liu Di thanked him and asked if it was time for them to move out, but afterwards he asked him to wait for a while so that he could take a shower and change his clothes. Yanqing Wen said that there are such brazen drivers. She asked Tieshi why conscientious drivers like him should resign. The bodyguard frowned. Liu Di and Qing Wen finally went out on business. Yanqing Wen was watching a video of Liu Di's performance. The guy was tall and thin, and the same white shirt. The girl began to suspect that it was Liu Di. She wondered why Liu Di was so popular. Qing Wen wondered what kind of person he was, this Liu Di. The car pulled up to the building. Yanqing Wen and Liu Do got out of the car and walked towards the house. Liu Di asked what they were doing here and what kind of building it was. The stand in front of him read the sales volume of the managers. Liu Di was surprised that the chairman's daughter should participate in such a business competition. Yanqing Wen watched the pensive face of Liu Di, who was thinking about a business project. Yanqing said that this is the financial culture of their company. All employees are salespeople. No matter who and what they are, they must be of value to the company, and she is no exception. Yingyi Group has been able to reach today's heights through really hard work. Liu Di said, he is considered an employee of Yingyi Group, which means he can go into sales and get to the top too. Qing Wen skeptically said, don't make him laugh. Yanqing Wen walked further into the office. The worker said hello to the lady, and the lady also said hello to them. He and Liu Di reached the receptionist's office. The secretary wished good morning to Madam and bowed briefly. Liu Di didn't expect to see such a beautiful woman here. The secretary handed over the documents for Yanqing Wen to sign. Qing Wen told Qian to arrange for him to meet with General Manager Li of Xineng Hospital later. The secretary accepted the assignment. Qian asked Liu Di who he was and thought he was cute like a puppy. Qing Wen introduced him as her driver. Qian was surprised that it wasn't Madam's boyfriend, but just a driver. After all, he is very handsome. His body, his skin is completely unreal. Qian told Liu Di that they shouldn't interfere with Madame Yan's work. She called him and her to wait for Madame in another office. Liu Di was already in the office with the secretary. Qian said that he should realize that he was not the equal of a goddess like Yanqing Wen. Then why wouldn't he look at her? Mo Tong said that it was Zhao Qian, a woman, 23 years old, single Miss Yan's personal secretary. She had a high work performance and was nicknamed Social Butterfly in the company. Liu Di was very embarrassed, and the girl ran her hand over his cheek. Qian asked if he wanted to add her as a friend. Liu Di thought she was very cute and embarrassed. Yanqing Wen told Qian to keep her distance towards Brother Liu, and it was time for her to get to work already. Qian said she knew. Zhao Qian asked Liu Di not to look at him like that. Their boss Wen had already found a man for her heart. Liu Di asked who it was. Qian said that she didn't know his name, but she was told that this person had saved Madame 3 years ago and he was a real hero to Madame. Yanqing Wen listened as the secretary said, wondering if Madame had found her hero. Liu Di was surprised that she thought she was a hero. Mo Tong told Liu Di that something strange was going on in Yanqing Wen's office. Mo Tong told the man not to worry as the whole thing was even funny. Liu Di watched Yanqing Wen's work. Mo Tong described the study. It had 3 prayer vases, a green painting like a tomb, those statues on either side like a mausoleum. Da Yanqing Wen looked like she came out of a tomb. Mo Tong made a comparative analysis and found that all these attributes were necessary for the curse, which was nicknamed mortal evil among people. Mo Tong laughed at the strangeness of people who believe in all sorts of curses and gods. Liu Di asked if the so-called mortal evil was just a fiction. Mo Tong was completely sure that these were just legends from local folklore based on bylanes. Liu Di believed in the virtual assistant's words, but he couldn't figure out who this girl could have offended to have the curse paraphernalia planted in her office. Liu Di told Qian that he would retreat to the restroom. At the very DL, he went to Yanqing Wen's office. Yanqing Wen sternly asked him why he entered without knocking. After all, it was impolite. Liu Di said that these 3 vases of hers are very good. Qing Wen said that they are a gift from the vice president of Zhao Group. They are old antiques, so be careful. If he breaks them, he will sell a kidney to restore them. Liu Di asked what about this painting. Yanqing Wen said that it was a gift from Vice President's son. Liu Di asked where these statues came from. Qing Wen replied that they are called water dragon pearls and are an exclusive handmade product. They are a gift from Wu Yan's son-in-law. Mo Tong remarked that it was not surprising. This guy was the ultimate hypocrite. Liu Di concluded that Vice Presidents Zhao and Sun were his accomplices. Liu Di decided to first break the mortal evil in the form of the 3 vases that Vice President Zhao had given him. He stormed one vase and it broke into small pieces. Liu Di said, "What a pity he broke it." Yanqing Wen asked Brother Liu what he was doing and demanded that he take his hands off her vase. The vase shattered into many pieces, but some of it almost survived. Liu Di said that he didn't break it on purpose. Yanqing Wen was very angry at the guy who lied without blushing. An excited Qian ran into the study at the loud sounds. She saw the broken vase and realized the guy was going to be in big trouble now. Yanqing Wen said that he had gone crazy. Liu Di said they were just vases, and he would return every penny. He asked her to give him her account number, and he would transfer the money to her. Qing Wen said that they were priced from 6 million yuan in the market, and asked if he was serious. Yanqing Wen tiredly said that she would write them off on him and deduct them from his salary. Liu Di said that the salary he received should be enough to pay. After all, it's only a vase worth 6 million. He could spend all his resources to invest 100 million in their company. Qing Wen asked where such statements came from. Qian told Mrs. Yan that it was time for them to move out to meet Mr. Li from Qiren Hospital. Yanqing Wen told Qian to call a cleaning lady to clean up this mess, after calling Liu Di. Kang told Xin that she couldn't play anymore and offered to go home and rest. Kang walked into the empty dining room. Kang noticed the gold card under the plate that Liu Di had left there. The girl reached for the map with her hand and examined it. Kang asked, Isn't this the same 5 million card that his father gave to Brother Liu? Xingxing asked if it's true and he didn't take his father's card. Brother Liu left the card here, so he didn't spend the money. Kang Kang exclaimed that he was a real gentleman. Xinxin said it was a shame that they kept calling him names and accusing him. Kong Kong said it's all worth their money. Xinxin said they ate his rice and deducted 5 million from his money. The twins enthusiastically discussed how noble and handsome he was, and he was an amazing cook. Xinxin said that they were being silly and they definitely hurt him. Kong Kong said that her sister was also at fault, because the two of them should apologize to him. Xinxing noticed that her sister was right. Kang Kang asked if he really didn't take his father's money. Where did he get his new clothes from? Xinxing supported, because his clothes must be worth millions. He used to live off of part-time jobs. So where did he get so much money from? Kong Kong said he was most likely spending his older sister's money. Kang Kang said that he left the card here on purpose so they would find it and feel guilty. Xinxing agreed and said that he was spending his third sister's money at the time. Kang Kang sighed and said that sometimes people seem so kind, but in reality they have ulterior motives, and it's terrible. Xingxing asked how can you just leave so much money here? After all, 5 million is her pocket money for a few months. Kang Kang suggested that the money be spent in secret from everyone. Liu Di sneezed loudly while sitting behind the wheel. Liu Di wondered if anyone remembered him. Qian told Madam that Qiren Hospital has refused their joint project 3 times already, and she is not sure if they will agree today. Qing Wen said that she has to win this billion-yuan order. Qian noticed that Mr. Li was treating her badly. Yanqing Wen ordered to stop this conversation. This time everything should work out. After all, not only her reputation but also her father's reputation was at stake. One of Yingyi Group's main businesses is medical equipment manufacturing, and Qiren Hospital is one of the largest hospitals in China. Dee realized that it was difficult to reach an agreement with Mr. They arrived at Qiren Hospital. Mr. Li Riley said the beautiful Miss Yanqing Wen honored him with her presence. Li said that the project he had discussed with them earlier would be very difficult to realize. He asked them to sit down to talk about many things. Liu Di asked the assistant to find information about that. Li Dahai, male, 45 years old, started his business by selling counterfeit medicines, is now the director of Qiren Hospital, a member of a criminal organization involved in sex scandals. Due to the hospital's negligent attitude towards its patients, hundreds of people suffered from poor medical care. Many so lost their health as fake medicines were used. Motong said that in the end the hospital was not penalized. Now this lawlessness is still going on. Liu Di thought that hell had emptied out and demons had descended on Earth. If such people are living, then why do we need heaven and hell? Qing Wen approached Mr. Li. If he really wants to purchase their products, she suggests that they drive together to the company. She will help him apply for a favorable policy for the hospital. Mr. Li said that this matter cannot be solved with 2 sentences and everything is negotiable. He suggested that they book 2 suites at the neighboring Huya Hotel and they would discuss everything over dinner. Liu Di shouted that he was serious about offering the girl a hotel. Liu Di said that she was a young girl and he suggested her to talk to him about the hotel business. He was outraged at how he could suggest such a thing to her. Yanqing Wen said, immediately silencing the guy who was ruining her serious deal. Qing Wen asked Li to ignore her new driver, as he was not yet used to his new job. Mr. Li said mockingly that he was her driver. Mr. Li disrespectfully called the guy a boy and told him never to interfere in the affairs of his superiors. He hoped the guy would learn his lesson. Mr. Li said that those must know that his big brothers are behind him. If they don't like something, among other things, no one in all of Shanghai would dare to cooperate with them. Yanqing Wen became very angry upon hearing such a hidden threat. Qing Wen asked if she would agree to dinner. The man would agree to this order. Mr. Liu assured the girl that she could not worry and enjoy her fame in peace. Qing Wen said that she had conditions. Firstly, she said that it was just a dinner, and secondly, she would be with her assistant Qian. Mr. Li readily agreed. Li figured it was a promotion, take one and get the other one free. He'd make a lot of money tonight. Yanqing Wen irritatedly said to Liu Di, "Does he realize who he is talking to? How dare he ask her to wait for him?" Liu Di reminded, "Didn't she say that in Yingyi Group, everyone can sell their services and get results, and isn't her driver the same person?" The girl thought for a moment, for Brother Liu was right in theory. Yanqing Wen told Brother Liu to stop behaving so horribly. He asked him to wait for 5 minutes and went back to the hospital building. Liu Di walked in and Mr. Li asked what happened to Mrs. Yan's driver and why did he walk in without knocking? Did he lack patience? Liu Di threw his leg over Mr. Liu's desk. Liu Di called Li Dahai a real animal. Mr. Liu shouted a curse and asked how dare the man call him names, for he would chop off his leg for such a thing. Liu Di told the man to make sure to check his email before threatening him. There was already 1 unread letter in Mr. Li's mailbox. Gosh, Li turned pale instantly. In the video that was sent to him, Li assured the thugs that he would do what they asked. Mr. Li said if they were told to use fake medicine, then let them use fake medicine. It's not like it will kill anyone. Lee Da-hai said during another transaction that everything in this life can be solved with money. Mr. Lee Da-hai thought it was impossible. How on earth did he know this? Because if this information was leaked to the media, he wouldn't be able to pay for it even at the cost of his life. Lee Da-hai wondered who this guy was that had dug up so much dirt on him. Mr. Lee Da-hai looked at the sender's name and learned that the driver's name was Liu Di. Mr. Lee Da-hai apologized to the guy and, deciding to make sure, asked his name. Liu Di introduced himself as Mrs. Yanqing Wen's new driver and gave his name, which was the same as the sender's. Mr. Lee Da-hai was on his knees begging Brother Liu to have mercy on him. Liu Di said that now that he knew what he was guilty of, let him do something to please him. Yanqing Wen said that she asked him not to go. Was it difficult to obey? Qing Wen said that they were going back to the company, but Liu Di asked her to wait for a while again. Yanqing Wen asked if the guy was going to stay in the hospital. Mr. Lee Da-hai approached them and asked Miss Wen to wait. Mr. Lee Da-hai brought her the contract and asked her to sign it right away. Lee Da-hai said that he had already signed everything and stamped it with the hospital seal, so she could just sign it. Qing Wen was surprised at the change in his mood. Mr. Lee Da-hai said that he immediately realized that the order is for 1 million, so he is offering them a contract for 2 billion, and he is willing to pay all at once. Qian thought that businessmen don't have conversations. After all, he was almost on his knees asking for a contract with him, even fiddling with money. Yanqing Wen read the contract, and there seemed to be no catch. She asked if the man was serious. Mr. Lee said he was very serious, and asked if she was satisfied with everything in the contract. Qing Wen affirmatively replied that she was fine with everything, and signed the document. After the successful transaction, Qing Wen and his group were on their way back together. Yanqing Wen thought that this was her biggest contract in her entire career in the company. This contract is enough to take any employee to the top of the sales rankings. Qian told Madam that they had received a payment from Chiren Hospital worth 2 billion. Qing Wen took note of this. Yanqing Wen asked Liu Di what Liu Di had said to Lee Da-hai, and whether he was the reason he signed the contract. Liu Di said that she and he found out about some of Lee Da-hai's shady dealings, so he threatened him to put everything in the media about his affairs. Qing Wen was clearly surprised and asked the one to behave normally. Liu Di jokingly said that he was just Lee Da-hai's nephew, which caused Qian to laugh. Liu Di asked how the company calculates the commission for the transaction. Qing Wen said the commission is 5%, so they get 10 million. She added that they will be contacted later. Qian said the guy is now a rich man. Liu Di said that he didn't need their money after all, it was their merit, and let Qing Wen take it as payment for the vase. Qian said that she didn't believe that he would really pay for it. Liu Di said that the remaining 4 million would be moral compensation, and let Qing Wen go to a psychologist for it, so that she wouldn't keep her emotions inside and suffer alone. He said he was always willing to look after her. Yanqing Wen was embarrassed by his words. Qing Wen said that one was not a hero at all. Qian felt that there was definitely something between them. Qing Wen was admired in the company's office because she had made a 2 billion deal. Many people were surprised to see Liu Di's name on the booth, as he did not work with them. One of the workers told a colleague that she saw some teenager came into the company with Miss Wen in the morning, and it was most likely Liu Di. Another coworker asked if Mistress cared about him. The girl was grabbed by someone's shoulder and she screamed. Liu Di gave them advice not to talk about the company's employees in public. After all, who knows, one of them might become the son-in-law of their chairman. Yanqing Wen grabbed him and asked him not to embarrass her in front of the staff. Qian definitely made sure that there was something between them. Mr. Lee spoke to Brother He Hu on the phone, and told him that his dark past was picked up from somewhere by a driver named Liu Di from the Yan family. Lee Da-hai said he would kill the guy or he wouldn't be able to sleep or eat. He Hu said that just recently someone offered $5 million for Liu Di's head, and it's very interesting. After a long day of work, people from the office were dispersing home. One of them suggested going to a new restaurant, as it had excellent barbecue. The girl Yanqing Wen and Liu Di were also getting ready to leave. When they opened the door, they saw the secretary. A secretary named Qian asked the protagonist what he was doing tonight. She asked him to have dinner together. The boss told her sternly that he still had a lot of work to do today. She and Liu Di will have dinner at home. After that, the main character and his girlfriend got into an automobile. It was an expensive Jeep. The guy said he found something strange. His girlfriend was interested. She asked if he'd found anything else. He cheerfully replies to her that Qian wants to sleep with him. At the same time, the girl is jealous of him. The girl got angry. She told the protagonist not to talk nonsense. Liu Di only laughed hard in response. In the evening, they gathered at the girl's house. There were tables set for an extensive dinner. All the dishes were very tasty and appetizing. They stood on a large table. Mrs. Wen thought to herself that she didn't think the guy was capable of such a thing. There were several other girls nearby. They were impatient for dinner. Liu Di came to the table and politely invited everyone to sit down and eat. The girls were really waiting for those words. They cheerfully said they were ready to begin. That's when they noticed the main character. The guy was eating very fast. With great appetite and without any respite, he consumed all the dishes on the table. Motong showed up. He told the protagonist that he's doing the right thing. He wants to defy genetics and get bigger. A lot of good food will strengthen the guy's body. The boy continued to consume food without stopping. The artificial intelligence named Motong recorded an increase in muscle strength and body power. As a result, the protagonist became stronger than most people on the planet. Mrs. Wen addressed the girls at the table by their names, Kai Kai and Xing Xing. She told them that after a big meal, they could use some exercise. They asked her if she was boxing again. Wen turned to the protagonist and told him to go with her now. The girls realistically imagined how Mrs. Wen would be in the ring boxing with the guy. There was silence at the table. The protagonist said nothing in response to Mrs. Wen's continuation. The girls were amused. Li Di picked his teeth with a toothpick and asked the girl if she was sure she wanted it. She gave him a surprised look. She confirmed her offer and told the guy to cut the crap. Dinner was over and everyone got ready for the boxing match. Liu Di and the girls came to the gym. Mrs. Wen asked the guy if he wanted to change his clothes, or if that's how he wanted to do the fight. She herself was wearing a boxing suit. The protagonist said he would simply take off the extra clothes. He asked the girl if she really wanted to fight him. The guy took off his shirt and tossed it aside. He was ready for a fight. The girls all looked at him. They liked his young body. Wen also watched silently. Li Di looked at his pumped-up figure. He realized that this was his new body that Motong had talked about earlier. Wen still continued to stare fixedly at the guy. She realized it was him. The guy stood around and asked the girl where they were going to fight exactly. Mrs. Wen was silent. She thought to herself that he wasn't a nymphomaniac, the guy she had only scheduled a fight for. The girl looked at the main character. She remembered that she had once been a red belt. The main character's muscles were inferior to hers. The girl wondered what would happen if she lost. The consequences could be very bad. 12. She realized that only the guy would be on top of her, and there was nothing else she could do. The protagonist stood on the gym floor waiting. He asked Wen if it was time to start quickly. The girl yelled at the guy for not memorializing anything. She clarified if that's what he wanted to do to a weak girl. Liu Di reminded her that she herself had offered to spar twice. Mrs. Wen replied that he was a man. He offered to let the girl admit defeat. Then he was willing to let her go tonight. She answered him fervently that she wouldn't just give up. The girl was preparing for a fight. They stood opposite each other. The boxing match was about to start. Suddenly the door opened. Some guy came in. He said he came to watch the sparring between Liu Di and Madame Wen. The guy started taking off his watch. He told the protagonist that he was no match for the girl. He asked Liu Di to fight him. This kid's name was Shi. At the age of 10, he was adopted by Father Yan. Guy Sai was trained from childhood in various martial arts. He went through rigorous training. Shi is a very strong fighter. If he fights against a bunch of bandits, he'll beat them all. He won't get hurt himself. The girl recalled that when she was attacked by hooligans 3 years ago, Sai was unable to come to her aid in time. He still blames himself for that. At this time, Shi was thinking to himself. He was remembering how Li Di was able to protect Madame Wen. In his opinion, the main character was a strange person and evil in the flesh. Eventually, Shi realized there was no time to waste. He got into a fighting stance and told the protagonist that they should start. Liu Di stood in front of his opponent. He motioned for him to start the fight. They were focused. The Shu fighter was silent. He swung his left arm and prepared to attack his opponent. Mrs. Wen told Shi to be careful not to hurt the protagonist. He told her not to worry. Suddenly, Shi started talking. He told his opponent that he joined the army at the age of 15 and served as a special forces fighter. He had several different awards. Liu Di thought of his rival that he cared about his country and had done many feats. The protagonist said simply that he is an ordinary citizen of his country. He learned to fight by the grace of God. That answer didn't please the opponent. Sai said he would find out the truth with his own hands. He decided to beat the guy until he told him everything. Shi rushed at his opponent with all his speed. The boy deftly deflected his swift punches. The protagonist fought thanks to the help of Motong's artificial intelligence. Liu Di fought professionally and quickly repelled any attacks of the opponent. During the pause, Shi noted that the opponent was fighting very well. He thought to himself that the guy had a lot of speed. The guy gave a crushing blow with his arm to his opponent. He had a lot of strength thanks to the fact that he was able to not only enlarge his body but also strengthen his aura. The system sent a message to the protagonist that the strength of his aura is now directly linked to his body. At the same moment, the main character's eyes lit up. He felt even more strength to fight. Fighter C was surprised he hadn't expected to see such a thing. The boy's mystical power amazed him. Shi thought to himself that his opponent was an extraordinary warrior, and that he seemed to have come out of the underworld. He thought that the protagonist was not an ordinary person. Liu Di probably served in the elite troops. In the end, C decided not to continue the fight any further. He stopped the fight on his own initiative. Liu D was satisfied that his opponent understood. He thought to himself that Z had a lot of anger inside, but not much fighting skill. The guy showed his hand to the side and suggested his opponent to go through the doors. There are many people here. C. Marshall was surprised by such a suggestion. He didn't know what to say to the guy. Shi put his hand to his chest and told the protagonist that he was ready to dedicate his life to serving him. Madame Wen was surprised by his actions. She shouted for Z to stop as soon as possible. Combatant C asked quite sadly whether the girl disagreed with him. The protagonist together with Shi went into the next room. Mrs. Wen's girlfriends came over. They stood listening near the door. Liu D was teaching his new acquaintance martial arts. He said that Shi should use the 7 points to release power. He should also make sure that his left hand was functioning properly. The protagonist tried to strike his opponent with his hand. He dodged it just in time. Liu D praised his opponent. He called him a good warrior and disciple. Eastern Excalibur had trained Shi well. Shi hesitated for a moment. He didn't understand how the guy could know about the Eastern Excalibur. This secret service is very secretive. Shi thought that only 2 people knew of Excalibur's existence. One of these possible people was a senior Chinese naval general. Suddenly, Shi was struck by a shocking realization. He didn't even believe himself. Z turned to the protagonist and said that he was very worried about him. He didn't understand how someone like Tian Liu could compete with petty hooligans. C said a clear conclusion. If the protagonist knows about the Eastern Excalibur, it means he is a member of it. There are 2 squads in this structure, Tian Liu Squad and Shibukai Squad. The most respected was the Tian Liu Squad. Its leader is Mr. Liu. Shi bowed to the protagonist and said that he had eyes, but he dared not look at him. The boy thought to himself whether he should tell his opponent that he didn't know anything. The 12 Liu D asked his opponent which hooligans he was talking about. Shi replied that one of the Shanghai crime bosses was offering 5 million for Mr. Liu's head. The boy thought to himself that such a price was concrete. In all his years, he had never had any enemies. Foes had appeared after he joined the Yan family. One of the main character's enemies is Ouyang. He fears that the guy wants to take over his power. The guy's second enemy is the hospital director whom he forced to sign the contract. 16 Shi told the protagonist that his brothers have influence in Shanghai. He can send them to help settle the situation. Liu D replied that he shouldn't do that. He clarified the opponent knows about the 5 million reward from somewhere. Shi replied that such information is passed on orally. He had heard this from one of the underground Rei in Shanghai named He Li. Hearing this surname, the protagonist realized who Ouyang was talking to that day. At the end of the fight, the guy told his opponent not to think about it anymore. He offered to spar later. C asked him to wait. Shi said his old instructor He Shan had arrived in Shanghai. He was promoted to Tian Liu's army a couple years ago. He asked the protagonist if he knew him. 22 Liu D asked Shi to let him know in advance if he wanted to tell Mr. Hai about him. Shi said yes. The protagonist thought to himself whether it was necessary to expose himself so quickly. If he was exposed, he would not be able to explain his new powers. A voice of footsteps was heard. It was Mrs. Wen walking over. She approached the main character. The girl asked him very anxiously if the guy was okay. The protagonist cheerfully replied that he had already told her that she shouldn't act like that. The girl took offense at that answer. The guy was amused by her reaction. Liu D started to walk away down the corridor. He waved to the girl and said goodbye. She turned to Mrs. Wen. She asked him what had happened to the protagonist. Mrs. Wen asked Shi strictly whether he had beaten up the protagonist. The fighter said he couldn't tell her everything. C added that he would be guarding her from now on, so she doesn't have to worry about anything. Liu D was sitting at his desk in his office. He was looking at his smartphone. 4. He looked at the video of the Shin girl. She was preparing to broadcast. The guy called her a little pain in the ass. The girl announced in the video that she was live streaming. The girl sang during the broadcast. She sang about the rain song. In the comments she was written that her cover of the song is good, but it is inferior to the original by D, and someone username Fire wondered if this comment was written by D, and another user asked in the comments for D and said something else. A user named Fanatic asked for D and to look at him. He said he was a real fan. After a short period of time, the main character came out of the live broadcast. The guy was sitting there with his smartphone and he was thinking. He made this song for himself and it caused such a stir. A girl named Kai Kai asked her girlfriend named Shin Hasin how she knew D, and Shin said irritably that she didn't know him. This wasn't the first time she had been asked this. Shin picked up her phone and her girlfriend called to her. She clarified from her for the umpteenth time how she knew D, and once again, Shin replied irritably that she did not know him really. Kai Kai said her sister is filming a new movie right now. She'd like to ask her to sing with D and D. She really wanted to meet him. Shin sat there thinking irritably where she could get D's contacts, and The next day, the protagonist came to the office for work in the afternoon. The girls in the office noticed him right away. One said he was very handsome and she wanted to meet him. This is when the system told the guy that the pulse not only frees his aura, but also releases his male attraction. His fascination spreads throughout his body. The boy turned to Motong's artificial intelligence. He asked it to find information about Li. Motong found all the data. Li's real name is Yanqing Wen. He is 36 years old. 6 years ago, he was a ruthless street concert. Now he's the underworld of Shanghai. To the public, he's the head of the Shanghai Chamber of Commerce. He also controls the underground casinos. He makes profits by criminal means. The protagonist thought to himself, that guy is really something. The guy picked up the smartphone in his hands and said confidently that he would have fun with Li. A boss named Li was sitting in his office surrounded by his secretary. He was just lighting a cigar. 2. The boss was relaxed and he didn't expect any negative messages that day. One of his handlers burst into the office. He reported that something strange was going on. Clarified what could have happened that was so strange that the subordinate panicked. The subordinate said that a few hours ago the police came to their ports. They had intercepted the ship on which their order had passed. The boss was thinking. He lit a cigar and said that there might be a traitor among their people. The guy replied that he thought so too at first. They decided to question their guards, but then someone called them on the phone and told them not to look for them because there was no traitor among them. The boss got angry. He jumped up sharply from his seat and said that something interesting was happening this time. That's when the guy who came in got a call on his cell phone. The henchman picked up the phone and said timidly something his boss's father was calling. The phone rang with a cheerful and laughing voice, calling the caller a good boy. Was even more angry. He checked with the guy who came in to see what he had said. He apologized and said it was someone on the phone. The boss shouted angrily into the phone and asked who was talking to him. He promised to kill the person on the other end of the phone. The person on the other end of the phone invited him to come to him. Angrily called his interlocutor a bastard. Everyone around him was silent. After a little thought, the secretary suggested he trace the call. The boss handed the phone to a subordinate and ordered the experienced hacker to find the bastard who called him as soon as possible. A little while later, Hay's boss got a call. He was told that they found the right person at an internet cafe near the Mars nightclub. Hay ordered 30 guys to be sent down there and do whatever it took to get this guy in. The boss went into the next room. He was already hoping that he could get even with the offender. Suddenly, he received a new call. He did not understand how it was possible that he was getting a call from another phone number. The caller recommended a couple tips to the boss on how he could find a good hacker. A little while before, Li Di came to the establishment and offered the manager $1,000,000 to remove all the customers. The guy decided to stay there himself at night. The manager was very happy about this generous gift. He said he would fulfill all the client's wishes. Liu Di sat down on the sofa and waited. The manager thought to himself that this rich man had a lot of money. A multitude of feet stomped down the corridor. It was Boss Hai's underlings running. They knew exactly which room the protagonist was sitting in. After a moment, Liu Di saw many people standing in front of him. They were armed with swords. After a short pause, the bandits rushed the whole group at the lad. Their foreman commanded them to move forward. Liu Di sat quietly on the sofa and smoked. He was calm and serene. He thought to himself that he would finally have fun today. Finishing the cigarette, the guy tossed it aside and prepared to fight. The cigarette went straight to the head of the bandit leader. That made him even angrier. The protagonist began to fight desperately. He fended off the enemy's attacks and demolished them with his blows. Someone wanted to hack the main character to death with a machete from behind. The guy saw it in time. Liu Di professionally and quickly dodged the machete blow. In response, he struck the attacker with his hand. The guy showed all his professionalism. He was beating the attackers with great speed. He used both hands and feet to strike. He used them to finish off his attackers. 5 minutes later, all the bandits were unconscious. Liu Di told them to tell their boss in farewell that he would no longer tolerate his antics. He promised to get him sooner or later. After some thought, the guy realized he'd have to visit the boss himself. After a while, the boss was approached by his handler. He was talking about how they almost lost 100 of their best fighters. The boss got angry and he immediately clarified how many people were with the guy. He thought there were at least 200 attackers. When the guy came to his senses, he said that the guy was alone, but he was very strong. Boss Hai was very astonished by such words. He clarified whether the protagonist was a monster. Next, the boss told his subordinate to gather Iron Fist, Taiga, Dao, and others too. He didn't believe the kid would beat his best fighters. The sidekick called Dao and told him that the boss ordered him to kill the protagonist. He told him they were on their way. The henchman tells the boss that his men have gone to the site and they will finish off Liu Di. Suddenly, a large explosion blew the door to the room where the boss was. They saw one of their fighters named Jack, and he was standing in the doorway. The boss asked Jack fearfully what had happened to the kid. Jack never said anything to them. He collapsed dead on the floor. Boss Hay and his handyman were shocked. There was a stomping of feet, and it was the main character who was walking silently without saying anything. Liu Di stood before his boss with a cigarette in his hand. There was a long and silent pause. That's when Boss Hay got really scared. He felt as if he was standing alone with his friend on a huge battlefield. The boss and the handyman felt as if they were the only ones left alive, and no one would help them. The protagonist to them now looked like a ruthless and great warrior standing on a mountain of corpses of his enemies. They saw the protagonist as not just a guy, but practically a fairy tale knight. The boss realized that he was completely restrained and paralyzed by intense fear. Hay couldn't even take his eyes off the main character. He was still scared. To regain consciousness, the boss rubbed his eyes with all his might to get rid of the obsession. Gradually, the mythical dreamscape disappeared. Hay realized that he was still standing in the room with his friend. The handyman asked the boss if he saw what the protagonist was doing. He himself almost fainted from fear. Boss Hai was still looking at the protagonist with a look of hatred. Liu Di stood with a cigarette in his hand as before. He turned to his boss and said that they had something to discuss. He added that for someone like him, who is kind and helpful to people and animals, the boss offered 5 million. Liu Di walked right up to the boss and asked him if he still thought the amount was justified. Hay started making excuses. He said that they have their own underground business, and he holds no grudge against the protagonist. He suggested that maybe there was some misunderstanding between them. The protagonist grabbed the boss by the shoulder and said this is no place to talk. He looked at the boss and clarified rudely that he was the one talking to him. A handyman intervened in the conversation. He reminded the protagonist that Boss Hay Lee himself was standing in front of him. Liu Di said that Hay is worthy of his title as an underground boss. He admires his strategy and intelligence. The protagonist gave him 10 seconds to admit his mistake. The boss realized he was walking into a trap. He was silent and said nothing. In complete silence was his handyman. He was waiting for the boss's answer. There came the sound of a woman's footsteps. The boss's secretary was walking quickly toward them. The henchman wondered why Boss Haley's maid personally passed it. The girl came up close to those present. She apologized. The secretary looked at the protagonist and told him that Hai Li was admitting her mistake to him. The protagonist said that he now has all the information he needs. He has an idea of Miss Hai Li's true identity. The girl was silent and she was surprised. She didn't understand who this guy was and how he knew everything about her. The secretary tells the boss that they need to cancel the next meeting and keep chatting with the protagonist. Liu Di said that if he wanted to figure out the secret identity, no one could stop him. He told the girl that he did not see her personal interest. The secretary replied that Hai Li would be at his service from now on. She only asked him not to declassify her identity. The guy thought about it and asked her who wanted 5 million for his head. He told her his real name. The secretary thought for a moment and said that Liu Di's name sounded familiar to her. Then she said it was Zhao Jie. He was once the vice president of the Yingji group. The protagonist asked after thinking for a bit, did No Yan do it? The system informed the protagonist that Zhao Ji was the one who gave Miss Yan the attributes to create deadly evil. The boy was glad that he found out that the person of interest was named Zhao Ji. Liu Di asked the secretary directly if they had received the assignment to kidnap Yanqing Wen. After a bit of silence, the girl confirmed that Zhao Ji had assigned them this task. Liu Di thought to himself that Yan was not so stupid anymore. He was able to get away with it and use others as weapons. The girl told the protagonist that they could deliver Zhao Jie to him. The guy told her he wanted Zhao Jie's teeth. He'd pay 1 million for each of them. The secretary told him they could handle it easily. She asked the guy why he wanted his enemy's teeth. Liu Di calmly and confidently told her that it was none of their business. After a little thought, the guy added that his main request was that he should get 1 tooth every day. The secretary put her hand to her chest and promised that their faction would definitely honor his request. Lavushka asked the guy if he would like to meet the bosses of other groups at their club. The guy replied to her that the gang boss Hai Li will not change for others, and it could always be the girl or her henchman. The protagonist was about to leave. He told the secretary that the next time they met, she should address him by his alias. Liu Di turned around and started walking away. He told them all that his alias was Emperor. The main character was walking down the street. He was completely absorbed in thinking about his affairs. Something diverted his attention and he heard cries for help from outside. 3. On the opposite side of the street, he saw some hooligans chasing his acquaintances, the girls Xin Xin and Kai Kai. The hooligans surrounded the girls from both sides. The girls angrily shouted at them to let them go. Liu Di watched silently at what was happening. He wondered to himself what was happening to those 2 girls. They were in trouble again. The boy headed in their direction, and he thought to himself that he must have owed a lot of money to the Yan family in his past life. The girls and their pursuers entered the building and there was a casino. Inside the casino there were many people and the tables were busy with a lively game. The guy came closer. He decided to hear for himself what was going on between the girls and the bullies. One of the guys asked the girls why they were running away. Kai replied that they had already lost 6 million. They had lost everything and didn't want to play anymore. Earlier, the girls thought about how they would spend the 5 million they received from Liu. Then they decided to go and play in a casino. At the roulette table, they kept losing. Luck was not on their side. That's when the girls decided they wouldn't have gone to the casino if they'd known it was going to be like this. Now they found themselves with a large debt to the casino. One of the guys offered to take $1 million from his family. The girls said they didn't have the money. The guy rudely replied that if they didn't pay, they had to pay with their bodies. He thought to himself that he had never had experience with twins before. The girls went to the exit, and one of them said they would go home to get money and come back. The guys told them that they were not in a bazaar and could not go and leave whenever they wanted. One of the guys told the girls they only had 5 minutes to find the money. The main character intervened in the conversation. He asked the boy if it was too much to ask. Liu Di added that the problem was only a few million. The girls approached him to help them. One of the guys approached the protagonist. He asked if he wanted to show off and save the girls. Liu Di said that even though he was annoyed by the girls, he wouldn't just watch them get hurt. The girls asked the guy to call their older sister and borrow $1 million for them. They promised to reimburse him $100,000 for his help. The guy thought to himself that the girls were rude. He decided to teach them a lesson. Liu Di went to the casino guys. He said he wouldn't help the girls get their money back, but he would fight these guys. The system gave Liu Di details about one of the casino guys. His name is Renbo Yuan. He plays games and gets into fights. His father's name is Ren Chuan. He is one of the richest people in Shanghai. Renbo looked carefully at the protagonist and asked what he wanted to play. Liu Di realized that his interlocutor didn't care whether he won or lost, as today's bet was a special trap for the girls. After a little thought, the protagonist said that he wanted to continue betting. He walked throughout the casino and approached the roulette table to play. Liu Di asked his interlocutor how much he would bet. He offered 5 million for himself. Xingchen asked the guy if he was crazy. He is not going to return the money, but raises the bet by 5 million. Renbo wondered why his interlocutor had so much pathos. He himself had bribed the casino owner a long time ago. After some thought, Renbo raised the bet to 6 million. He was confident of winning. The protagonist, after a little thinking, raised the bet confidently to 100 million. Xingchen asked the protagonist excitedly if he wanted to die. The guy asked his opponent if he agreed to his bet. Renbo said on the sly, he almost got scammed by the main character's girlfriends. Now the guy's offering him a bet of 100 million. He wants to see if the guy has that kind of money. The casino manager came over and he checked Liu Di's personal card. It passed the capital amount check. The casino is ready to offer him the best VIP area. Renbo was very surprised, and the manager confirmed that the protagonist's bet is valid. Renbo thought about it. He remembered that his entire account balance was 100 million. The girls stood there wondering how the protagonist had so much money in his account. Renbo started calling various relatives to borrow money. Eventually, Renbo put the card on the table and said he was continuing to play. He specified that he was betting $1 billion. He was able to make that bet because he had all his connections. There was silence all around. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen at the end of the game. After a short pause, Liu Di said that he is betting 10 billion, and that is not the limit. Renbo didn't understand why his opponent was so confident of his own victory. As a result, Renbo crumpled his cards lying on the game table. Renbo was very confused. He didn't even know what to do. He ended up getting angry. He asked how the protagonist dared to enter his establishment. The owner of the casino is his cousin, Master Fung Yu. He said his cousin would be here in a minute. The main character was very happy about the news. He was very happy that Haley's gang would come here. There were gang members walking down the corridor. Immediately, the stomping of many feet was heard. The main character ended up standing by himself in the center with the girls. He was surrounded by a bunch of thugs. The girls were very frightened. Xingchen asked fearfully what they should do now. One of the gang leaders said their boss called and told them not to leave the casino until he got there. Liu Di stood calmly, and his appearance did not express any emotion. He replied that he was even scared. The girls didn't believe that he was really scared. The guy walked over to the couch and told him to be woken up when the big boss arrived. The girls were very saddened, and they decided it was their fault the guy got in trouble. The big boss had already arrived. The girls immediately warned the guy about it. Uncle Renbo, surrounded by his guards, finally entered the room. Renbo was excited about his relative's arrival. He said he was being bullied. He added that Liu Di had swindled him out of money. The boss was outraged. He said he wanted to see who dared to bully his nephew. Renbo told his relative to come with him. He promised to show his abuser. Liu Di was lying quietly on the sofa at that time. The girls came up to him and told him to get up because the gang's boss had arrived. Renbo and his uncle came over and he pointed at the main character. Liu Di was lying quietly on the sofa as if nothing had happened. The boss turned softly to the protagonist and called him Mr. The nephew was very surprised. He asked his uncle why he was treating Liu Di like that. He called for the boy to be quartered immediately. Renbo addressed the past bandits personally. He demanded that they beat up the head hero. The nephew confidently shouted to his uncle about taking full responsibility. Just then, the head boss turned around and punched his nephew with his fist with all his might. Renbo fell down and pitifully said that uncle hit the wrong person. He demanded to kill the protagonist. The boss turned to his underlings and told them to beat the crap out of his nephew. The bandits pounced and started beating Renbo with all their might. He couldn't fight back. 10 minutes later, the boss's nephew was completely and very badly beaten. The head boss turned to the guy and said that they were done. Liu Di was lying quietly on the sofa. The girls were most surprised by what happened. They did not understand what was happening. The guy sat down and said he was going to go. At the same time, he was calm. The boss gave the cigarette to the protagonist. He also respectfully apologized to him. The protagonist took a drag on his cigarette. He exhaled, relaxed. The boss stood beside him and remained silent. The guy turned to the girls and said they had to go. They agreed. Reluctantly, the main character turned around and left with the girls. The boss turned to his nephew and asked if he knew who he was messing with. He pointed out that the protagonist was the boss of their city and Mr. Taitsu. The guy walked out of the casino building and approached the car with the girls. Liu Di turned to the girls and told them to go home. Xin apologized to the protagonist for taking the money his father gave him. She thanked him for saving them today. The guy replied that their gratitude was not enough for him. He helped them so that there would be no discord in their family. The girls were outraged. They wanted to ask a lot of questions, and the guy plugged his ears so they couldn't hear them. The girls kept asking the protagonist what had happened to those bandits and why they were so afraid of him. The boy opened one ear and told them that the bandits knew a good friend of his who had stood up for him. The girls decided not to ask any more questions. Suddenly there was a phone call from his work. The caller asked where he was. The girls asked the guy who had called him, and he hurried to the exit and said he had to go. Liu Di wasted no time in arriving at his company's office for the meeting. A secretary met him outside Mrs. Wen's office. She told him that the boss had ordered the protagonist to accompany her on a date. The guy didn't believe her, and he walked up to the entrance of the supervisor's office. Liu Di opened the door silently and confidently. He saw Madame Wen sitting quietly at her desk. The guy went straight into the office. The girl sat at the desk and was silent. The guy asked her how she could just take someone else's life and disregard it. The girl told him she was going to see Mr. Tu. She has to help him with some deals. The protagonist thought to herself that she had a very good heart. The girl put a bunch of folders on the table and told the guy to go through the lists. Master Tu has a bad temper. Because of that, she wants to donate some documents to him on her behalf. Liu Di told her that she was acting wrongly. It would have been better if she had donated the wine. Perhaps then the master would have remembered that she was his goddaughter. Madame Wen didn't know that Master Tu was a drinker. She decided to write it down in her notebook. The girl was about to leave and she took her bag from the table with her. On her way out, she told the main character to take her to the bank. The guy asked why she was going there. Mistress was surprised at such a question and said she needed money. The bank building was a normal working day with customers coming in and out. A large truck pulled up to the building and stopped near the entrance. Inside was a commander and an officer. The officer turned to the boss and informed him that there were 10 minutes left before the bank closed. After the civilians left, they could begin Han's mission. The boss responded by asking if old man Duanhua really wanted to compete with his soldiers. He added that imitating a bank robbery was a bad idea. The officer said that with all due respect, Duanhua's soldiers are much stronger than their soldiers. The boss promised that he could fight back. He added that he had some aces in his pocket. The officer remembered the phrase they were told they were not rookies, but better warriors in the whole country. The boss was the commander-in-chief Hai Shan. He was the head of China's secret military organization. His subordinate officer was the captain of the A-team, and his name was Luo. Luo told the boss that 6 of those rookies were already in place. He said to wait until they robbed the guy and then they'd win. Hai Shan said that Duan is very confident, and because of that he is going to fail. He said that they will wait a bit and see the real show. At this time, the protagonist, accompanied by Mrs. Wen, approached the bank building. The guy got a message from a system that told him there was going to be a robbery here in 5 minutes. The system gave additional data that some of the people in the bank are not ordinary passers-by, but participants in a robbery in progress. The artificial intelligence further analyzed and found weapons on some of the visitors. The guy turned to artificial intelligence and said that someone wants to rob a bank, but it's no ordinary. Mrs. Wen slid a wad of money to the guy and suggested that he take it. Liu Di told her to remember that he had saved her. The girl said that the money was for his pocket money. The guy cheerfully replied that he didn't need her money and let her buy him cigarettes. The girl was very upset and asked the guy what kind of person he was. The guy told her cheerfully that he wanted a pack of Huatsu cigarettes. Mrs. Wen told him she'd beat him to death someday. Liu Di arrived at the bank building. That's where the robbery was planned. The main character noticed some suspicious guy sitting on a bench and he said hello to him. The boy unsuspectingly said hello back to Liu Di. The protagonist came up to a guy and told him it was a nice day. He suggested he rob a bank. The guy thought about it and said that the weather was actually pretty good today. Only then did the boy realize the meaning of the words he had heard. He asked Liu Di what he had said. The protagonist prepared to punch the guy and said he was unannounced. Liu Di hit the guy really hard. He didn't expect the attack and fell to the floor. The protagonist was standing next to a guy lying unconscious. He was able to prevent a robbery. The commander in the observation car, Shan, angrily shouted that he did not understand what was going on. His subordinate Luo replied that he had familiarized himself with the information on all of Chief Duan's men, but there was no such person among them. The protagonist heard the stomping of many feet, and it was the robbers coming to kill him. The bandit leader shouted to his subordinates to attack the people. The protagonist was ready to fight, and one of the attackers he kicked with all his might. He began beating the other attackers with confidence and speed. They could not offer any resistance. Liu Di was able to disarm most of the bandits with his own strength during the fight. Eventually, the guy noticed that only a few of the gang leaders with black glasses were left standing. Bandits with black glasses wanted to kill the guy. They yelled at him that they were going to kill him. Liu Di fearlessly attacked these bandits and attacked them. He was able to deal with them like the others. As a result, all the bandits were left lying unconscious on the ground after the fight. Liu Di stood after the fight in the center of the room. He was able to defeat all the intruders. Commander Shan was very angry. He didn't understand how Luo Di was able to defeat 7 of his best soldiers so quickly. Luo said that it all seemed like a joke. The commander ordered a subordinate to go and catch Luo Di for him. Luo replied that it would be done. Luo then rushed to the car door and prepared to flee into the bank building. Slamming the car door, he sped off with all his might. He had to be in time to capture Liu Di. At this time, the protagonist stood in the middle of the room. He told the defeated criminals that they were strong bandits but had chosen the wrong road. The boy heard the sound of footsteps from outside. He realized it was someone coming for him. Liu Di noticed a uniformed fighter approaching him from the side. The guy thought to himself that the situation was heating up, and he needed to gather all his strength for a decisive blow. Liu Di hit the past Luo with all his might. The soldier felt as if his insides were collapsing. The protagonist continued to beat Luo. He couldn't resist in any way. The main character's final blow sent Luo flying off to the side and banging against the wall. Luo was very angry but didn't understand how it was possible that the guy was able to anticipate his blow. Commander Shan watched his subordinate fight. He didn't understand how this was possible either. Mrs. Wen entered the room. She asked the boy what was going on here. Liu Di answered her that there was a bank robbery, and the handsome and strong guy was able to successfully overpower the robbers. The boy shouted to the girl that it was time for them to leave and they couldn't stay here. Mrs. Wen asked him where the young man who had defeated everyone was. Liu Di replied to her that the handsome man was now coming downstairs. She asked him strictly if he was also in the fight. At that time, Luo woke up. He was badly beaten and wanted revenge. He thought angrily that the protagonist was lucky he hadn't caught him. 10 minutes later, an ambulance pulled up to the building and took Luo away. After a while, Shan came to the scene of the fight along with Mr. Duan. Duan said to Shan that he didn't expect his wards to be brought to their knees by an ordinary civilian. Shan replied very angrily that it was just an accident. Duan said angrily something was not an accident. He added that the people in this city are very brave and even braver than the entire SWAT team. Commander Shan and his subordinates were watching a video of Liu Di beating up criminals. Shan thought that from the strength and ability of this guy, he could tell that his level was closer to S. The commander thought it would be really nice if they recruited a guy. The commander turned to a subordinate nicknamed Bear and told him to find the protagonist in 12 hours. The subordinate asked the commander if he was really going to recruit Liu Di into the army. Shan replied that the boy would not join them and would simply become their mercenary. Shan thought that together with Liu Di, their plan could be realized. Duan turned to the commander and offered the men a drink tonight. The commander very roughly threw Mr. Duan's hand off his shoulder. Shan replied very rudely to Duan to drink by himself alone. Duan said after the commander that if he wasn't thirsty, there was no need to be angry. Duan, along with his subordinate, stood and watched the video of the battle involving the protagonist. Duan turned to the subordinate and called him commissioner and said that he had 10 hours to find Liu Di for him. Duan thought to himself that he wanted Liu Di to be the leader in his police team. The commissioner thought that if old man Duan wanted to steal the protagonist from him, it wouldn't work. At this time, Liu Di was riding in the car he was driving and communicating with his virtual assistant Motong. Motong said that 4 military units are currently looking for information about Liu Di. They are looking for footage of the protagonist during a fight at a bank. Guy instructed Motong that after he finished cleaning up the records, he should hide for a while. Motong replied immediately to the protagonist that he understood and would do everything. At that time, the law enforcers were looking for footage of the main character. The computer system was conducting a process of face comparison. Duan watched the videos carefully. He said that Liu Di is really very good. Suddenly, the monitors and displays of the enforcers completely disappeared. He Shan asked a subordinate if there was a technical glitch in the system. Mr. Duan also noticed that the videos had disappeared. He was annoyed. A subordinate told Commander He Shan that all the videotapes of Liu Di were missing. At this time, in one mansion, a servant brought documents with important information to a gentleman. The servant told the master to look at the important information for him. It must have been interesting. Mr. read the information that Yanqing Wen and Liu Di signed a contract totaling 2 billion. The servant said that Yanqing Wen has very good prospects. The master replied that he knew that because he was her father. The gentleman, looking absent-mindedly out the window, asked the services what he wanted to tell him. The servant replied that Liu Di was at the center of the scandal. He suggested that the protagonist had a great talent. Master replied that he was no longer young. No matter how much he did for the Yang family now, it wouldn't be enough to find real talents in the company. Master said that Liu Di is a very rare talent to find such a person only once in a lifetime. The servant replied to the master that Liu Di had no interest in the Yan family. The gentleman replied that it's understandable. The main character with great talent is also arrogant. He is also very young. Master said that he has his own methods to make Liu Di rethink his priorities and take control of his Yan family. The master gave an order to a subordinate. He said that he would give the medical equipment sales project to Yanqing Wen under his full control. The servant was very surprised. The subordinate asked the master to think about it. This project is very important to the whole family, and a lot of money has been invested in it. He recalled that Yanqing Wen had only been with the company for 3 years. The master said he can't rely on Qing Wen alone. For this reason, he is putting Liu Di in charge of this area. The servant reminded us that the protagonist likes Qing Wen. The servant said he knows about it, but he's sure Liu Di won't let them all down. The master said that his daughter is very talented, because of which she was able to charm Liu Di. The master said he would return to Shanghai in a couple of days and hold a family banquet at Yan Manor there. He added that this time he will invite his friends who have returned from abroad. They will meet together to exchange new ideas. The gentleman said that a big military chief who is very influential in the country's army had recently arrived in Shanghai. The servant asked the gentleman carefully whether he meant General He Pa. The gentleman slowly poured himself tea from the teapot and said that he was exactly referring to General Pei Ha. He added that it would help his young friends to get acquainted with people of high rank. He told the servant to call Duan Hua too, as he had been friends with He Pa for a long time. Liu Di together with Madame Wen arrived at her mansion. They went inside. When they opened the doors, they noticed something was wrong and were attracted by an unusual odor. Wen told the guy that something strange was going on here. The guy replied that if something was unclear, we should go and see. The two of them opened the door to the room. The girl shouted that the smoke was eating her eyes. That's when they noticed the two maids in the kitchen double-teaming the food. Madame Wen asked the maids strictly what they were doing here. The girl told her that they had spent 2 hours to prepare dinner for the protagonist. Madame Wen asked them with great interest if they had cooked dinner for Liu Di. The girls tell her that they have wronged the protagonist, so they want to apologize. This is their first cooking experience, and they dedicate it to Liu Di. The girls put their arms around the boy and led him to the table. They wanted him to taste their dish. Liu Di sat down at the table and opened the lid on the plate. He asked what kind of dish it was. One of the girls replied that they made fried rice and egg. The girls told the protagonist that they tried very hard and for him to taste their food. The system told the guy that there was an extremely dangerous poison called benzaprine in the food. The guy freaked out. Liu Di turned to the girls and told them cheerfully that he forgives them. The maids replied to the guy that they knew he was the best. The girls turned around to Madame Wen and informed her that they had something to tell her. Mrs. Wen asked them with great consternation and interest what was wrong. One of the girls held out a map to Madame and said that this was the map Liu Di had left on the dining table. One of the girls said the main character wasn't as bad a person as he was thought to be. Wen thought, how could the protagonist have money if he didn't take the card? That means he didn't come to the Yan family for money, but for her personally. Wen thought to herself, what is she thinking about? This is an impossibility. One of the girls told Madame that the main character had a lot of money. Wen asked how Liu Di could have money. The maid told the mistress that the protagonist had 1 billion or 2 billion. Miss Wen suggested that Liu Di's fortune might even be 10 billion. The girls didn't believe her right away. One of the maids said that the guy might have at least 10 billion, but they don't know the exact amount. Mistress was thinking. She realized that with a sum of 10 billion, the guy must be in the ranking of the richest people in the world. Madame Wen asked the girls with interest how they knew all this. The maids told the mistress that they saw the guy bet 10 billion in the casino at once. Mistress thought very surprised about Liu Di what he was doing. The girls said that the main character is definitely a good person. They'll tell him that when he comes back. Mrs. Wen told the girls that for the sake of everyone's safety, they should still know. In doing so, they would pretend not to know anything. The maids answered Mistress not to worry as they knew everything. Madame Wen stood surrounded by her maids. They were waiting for the protagonist to arrive. Liu Di came into the room and said they must be hungry. He suggested they try some real egg-fried rice. One of the girls said that the flavor of this fried rice was different from what the guy had previously cooked. Madame Wen looked at the guy and wondered whether he was a good or bad person. In the end, Wen, after much hesitation, decided to try the cooked rice herself. After tasting the food, Mistress liked it very much. She was satisfied. The guy explained to the girls that the food tasted different because he changed the seasoning and added a ginkgo tree seed. Liu Di explained to them that he prepared this rice for them to quench the anger in their hearts. Mrs. Wen got mad at the guy for eavesdropping on them. He told them that he wasn't eavesdropping on them and they were just talking very loudly. The guy turned his back to the girls and said he had some very important business to attend to. The protagonist said that after he finished his business, he would give his free time to help the Yan family. The boy said goodbye and headed for the exit. Madame Wen gave him a long look. The girl said, wondering if she had misunderstood the main character. The guy thought to himself something a classy man like him must have a broad outlook, so he wouldn't argue. The protagonist was sitting in his home and he was working intently at his laptop. Liu Di told his virtual assistant Motong that it was time to make their plan a reality. The system added the guy's mindset of a better marketer. 100,000 commercial layouts were also launched. Liu Di picked up his smartphone and he needed to start work now. The protagonist thought Di's fervor had waned a bit, so it was time. The guy shouted to his assistant Motong that he was starting to lay out. There's a post on the forum with a question. The first 100 people who guess it will get $500,000 each. A user named D-San said tens of thousands of messages per post went through in 10 minutes. Another user wrote that the author of the post must have thousands of people with the latest computers. A user named Katz, so cute, said the owner of this post is not from China at all. One user wrote that it's funny that a person is willing to pay 100 people $500,000 each. A person under an anonymous account wrote that the whole thing was just a joke. The girl at the computer sat reading the messages. She noticed the name Otto Rita there. The user recalled that Otto Red was a famous mathematician who invented the multiplication sign. One of the many users wrote that his answer is 12 and 115. A person under the nickname User Online said the SIS is very naive. Network B user wrote that whether it's right or wrong, the post is still fake. Then the user noticed that she received a message on her smartphone. She read that she was the first to answer correctly, and her account was credited with 500,000 yuan. The girl was very happy this money would cover her college tuition. Then it was announced that the winner was a user with the nickname I Dream of College Life. 99 more people can take a chance. A user with the nickname Unknown wrote that he doesn't believe it's true. A user under the nickname I Am Your Father wrote that someone guessed and now everyone is sitting on the money. A user named Money wrote that he didn't believe it and asked to be pinched. Liu Di read the messages carefully. He thought that the more answers he got, the better. The guy continued to scrutinize the posts of different users in the chat room. A message appeared in the chat that all 100 prizes have been successfully drawn. A user under the nickname Autumn Flower wrote that she adores Dasana. Someone under the name Carefree asked the user if he really won. User Pencil wrote that $500,000 left her since she just now logged into the forum. Liu Di turned to his virtual assistant and said that they would now write the second question. A new question appeared on the forum, and there was a message that the new prize would be 100 million. The author of the question was listed as D-San. A user under the nickname Dog Number 1 indicated that the author asked one more question and the prize would be 100 million. A user nicknamed Red Paint wrote that the author wants to create a serious world problem with his riddles. Other users wrote about a mysterious person who controls a large number of accounts. They also recalled that after Singer D, user D-San appeared. The next day morning at 5 o'clock, people were sorting through large piles of documents in a large company. One of the girls said that the numbers in the riddle were coordinates. She clarified that she thought she understood what they were. The girl immediately decided to enter the coordinates into the computer to see the result. It was reported that Mr. Hay had successfully solved the second puzzle. The correct answer was Gemini. A user with the nickname Jolly Fan wondered how it was possible to think of such a thing. A user named Bowl of Water wondered what the twins would have to do with this. The next day, the protagonist continued to work on his laptop. Guy instructed Motong's virtual assistant that it was time for them to get down to business. A message appeared on the forum. It was suggested for participants to find their other half in life. A user with the nickname Invincible Xiaoqiang wrote that this post was written for him. A user named Enemy of Mosquitoes wrote that this post is very poetic and there is a QR code on the back. Another user wrote that he doesn't care and will scan the QR code first as a sign of respect. One user was looking at a message on his smartphone where it suggested downloading Gemini. He activated the download and immediately received a message that it had completed successfully. The user thought to himself that the download was very slow. The smartphone asked for the user to enter a nickname. He entered as a careless person. A message appeared that the Gemini system was analyzing the user's identity. The guy thought to himself that this application software was very secure. He purposely did not write any information about himself. The system gave the guy a message that his personality analysis was complete. Even though he looks confident, he's worried inside. The boy was very surprised to read the message. He couldn't believe that it was really about him. The guy saw a message that the pairing to the user was successful. Then the user saw pictures of 2 girls on the screen. He joyfully decided to himself at once that he must meet her. The system reported that there were hundreds of millions of downloads and 50 million new registered users. One of the user wrote that this app can analyze it. Liu Di thought to himself that thanks to the magic eye ability, the app could make accurate analysis and pairings. One of the users thought that Di-san is a true genius. His program has gained unimaginable fame. The next day there was a meeting in a large company. The director asked where the Gemini program came from. One of the subordinates approached the director and called him Mr. Lee. He explained that the Gemini program had recently been developed and launched by Creator. The director wondered if a newly established company could be so popular. The meeting participants said that after the introduction of the Gemini app, the number of their users immediately dropped by 4% and continues to decline. The director was very angry that the drop was as much as 4%. He instructed his employees to copy Gemini's methods and add them to their applications. The expert replied that they have already tried to do this, but so far their technical team does not have that knowledge. Director Lee was very angry. He shouted at his subordinates not to say such nonsense anymore. Liu Di continued to work on the internet promoting the Gemini program. The guy told his virtual assistant that they should at least get their own office, since they are now a full-fledged company. Motong interrogated the guy about what exactly he wanted from him right now. Liu Di replied that a rather large, grandiose, and very intriguing office was needed. Motong's virtual assistant began running scans at the request of the protagonist. Motong gave out a message that the tallest building in Shanghai is Junteng. The guy liked the offer. He confidently said he was buying. The system reported that the best 300 candidates were selected from 100,000 people. The conversion and approval of the company will be over in 3 days, and the contract is already being signed. Liu Di carefully watched and analyzed all the information he received from the assistant. The guy thanked the deputy. He pointed out that they had no need for talent and needed trustworthy people. At this time, life in the mall was buzzing and going full steam ahead. A salesman in a clothing store was working with a document and a calculator. He was doing calculations. Suddenly, the salesman was distracted from his work by the ringing of his phone. The salesman picked up the phone and greeted Brother Liu and asked why he called him now. Liu Di greeted the salesman and called him Ajia. He recalled that when he was a university student, he dreamed of starting his own business. Ajia was happy about the call and he said it was all just the dreams of his youth. Liu Di told the salesman that he had started a company here and invited him to come over to help him. The seller was very surprised by such a request. He did not expect such an offer. Ajia asked Liu Di if he was really sure he could help him. The protagonist replied that she only trusted him. Then a girl came up to the salesman and asked him what he was doing at this hour. The salesman called the girl Sun Li and said it had been 3 years since she had last smiled at him. Ajia shouted menacingly that he wouldn't do it anymore, and with a mighty blow he flipped the table over. The salesman decided to leave. He told the girl not to just call him Ajia. The salesman, after shedding his work clothes, told the girl that his name was Zhang Tianjia. At the same time, the protagonist was at home in Madame Wen's mansion. The girl turned to the guy and said they needed to get out early today. Mrs. Wen was wearing an evening gown and she told the guy that important clients were coming to the company today. The guy looked at her in surprise. He started to remember who he was meeting with today. Liu Di looked at his smartphone and saw a message. It said there was a meeting at the Junteng building at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. A girl and her boyfriend were traveling in a car. She said they were leaving in a hurry, and so she brought him some buns. Liu Di told the girl that her concern is very strange. She either wants to trick him or steal from him. Mrs. Wen told the guy he had nothing to steal. She brought him buns so he wouldn't get bored. Liu Di wondered aloud in the view of many women whether men look like him. The girl asked the main character how he got so much money. He replied that he and his friends had started a company called Creator. The girl replied that she understood. She thought to herself that the name of the company did not sound reliable. Mrs. Wen told the guy that if he needed help, he could go to her. The guy told her that if she said that, he might tell her a couple of his secrets. The girl was very surprised. She asked what kind of secrets a guy could have. Liu Di told her that he was actually a pretty good singer. He invited her to listen to him sing. Mrs. Wen replied to the guy that she'd get around to it and he'd better concentrate on driving. A little later, they arrived at the Inji Corporation building. They went up to the office. Some of the female staff members were chatting among themselves. One of them said that Liu Di looked a lot like a puppy. In her opinion, he's not suitable for Miss Yan. The protagonist was sitting outside Mrs. Wen's office and he wondered who was coming today. Just then, the doors opened and 2 young guys walked in. They were in business suits. Liu Di thought to himself that the reward from Hei Li would be very generous. He decided to himself that he would get himself Zhao Jie's teeth today. He thought that the two jerks named Fung Yu and Zhao Jie were not the people Yanqing Wen was waiting for. The guests came and sat down at Madame Wen's table. One of them asked what happened to the vases Zhao had given her. The girl answered him frankly and simply that by accident all the vases were broken. The guy was surprised and couldn't believe that all the vases could break by accident. The girl told him it wasn't an accident. Liu Di broke 3 vases on his first day of work. The guy thought Liu Di was a complicated person. He didn't touch anything in the first few days, but managed to break the death key that cost 7 million yuan. The guy angrily thought to himself that there were a lot of people in the office right now, so he needed to keep his cool. Madame Wen looked at her interlocutor with surprise and interest. Wen asked the guy when their customers would arrive. He told her it would be a while. At this time, Liu Di turned to the secretary and he called her Qian and asked her to come over to him. The secretary walked up to the guy and asked him what he wanted to know. The main character asked her what kind of people they were expecting today. Qian replied to him that they were waiting for a god of music named Di, and he should be in their company soon. Liu Di wanted to suddenly shout loudly to everyone around him that he had come. The secretary told him that she couldn't believe it. She remembered that yesterday, Director Yan had instructed Mr. Wen to sell home medical equipment in large quantities. The secretary told the guy that Mrs. Wen has an acquaintance who started an entertainment company, and it turns out that singer Dai is also one of the entertainers. Qian said dreamily that she imagines that this singer is there very handsome and rich. The protagonist laughed silently and joyfully to himself. He liked the secretary's words. Just then several large cars pulled up to the corporation building. Armed men began to emerge from the vehicles, and there were many of them. A group of armed men in suits marched in a whole group toward the corporation's office. The group leader said that after his 3 years abroad, the Yan family would no longer look down on him. The leader stood outside the building and chuckled to himself, looking up at the office. The group of guests went up to the floor where the management of the corporation was at that time. Mrs. Wen greeted the guests and called their leader named Ji Ming. She told him that they had not seen each other for a long time. One of the previously passed guys told Sumin to relax. He added that Di hadn't come yet and, standing in the office, Jing Min asked his interlocutors why Di and just go somewhere. Eventually, he sat down in his chair and said emphatically that today he would handle all matters on behalf of Di, and one of the guests who came over said that Jing Min was completely right. Di and there is no need to go to meetings. Jing Ming said confidently that now Di and has a huge influence on the public. The interviewee told him that if Di actually came and supported their new product, it would help sales a lot. Jing Ming said that Di and was able to rise because of his financial support, so he will represent him. Another guest said that all of Di's popularity is because of Cu Ming's favor. The guy said they're willing to pay for Di's public appearances to the tune of $300 million. The contract could be signed today. Jing Ming said that the contract for Di and Di's public appearance for $300 million was only signed because of his friendship with Miss Wen. Jing Ming then said that after they agreed on the price, they should talk about a plan to realize their idea. Madame Wen thought to herself that it was very good that she had stayed up at night to come up with a plan. One of the guests told Jing Min that he had already come up with a plan and gave the man a folder of documents. Mrs. Wen approached the guy, calling him her son-in-law, and said that her father had entrusted her with the project. He replied that they were a family, and it didn't matter whose plan they were going to work on. Eventually, the girl put her file folder on the table. There was her plan. Madame Wen said resolutely that let Jing Min choose the plan himself now. Jing Ming decided to familiarize himself well with each of the proposed plans. He said that the concert plan from Fung Yu is noisy, expensive, and loud. Miss Yan's plan will be more charitable. The girl said that their new product is a gadget for the prevention of childhood diseases. For this reason, a charity event would be the best solution. Jing Ming told them that they hadn't come to a common decision. Because of all the disagreements, it would be difficult to do anything. Jing Ming told the girl to pay attention to him. He reminded her that he had once chased her for 2 years. Jing Min told her that he would accept her continuation if she went out with him tonight. The girl was very surprised and annoyed at such a suggestion. The girl said rudely to the guy that work is work, and their relationship was out of the question. Jing Ming told her that he would have to seriously consider both of their options. Suddenly, Jing Ming jumped up from his chair and said that he needed to think about a banquet for the Yan family. Guy asked Mrs. Wen if her father would be disappointed if he rejected her plan. Jing Ming asked the girl why not celebrate the young talent Mr. Yan was talking about. Suddenly, there was a sound from a lighter in the side. It was the main character lighting a cigarette. Slowly, Liu Di's side approached the table to the conferring people. Jing Ming asked irritably to the guy whether he was a human or a ghost. The protagonist questioned the man if he had ever seen a smoking ghost. Jing Ming very angrily interrogated the strict guy about what he was talking about. The main character said that he was the young talent Mr. Yan was talking about. Jing Ming absolutely no way believed that the protagonist is the singer Di, and Liu Di asked whether an entertainment company that has only been registered for 5 days would be able to sign a contract with a great singer. Jingming told the audience that he knew he wouldn't be believed. That's why he has a video of Di's rehearsal, and the guy pulled a smartphone out of his pocket and told everyone to watch the tape. In the videotape, Jingming was sitting at a piano and playing. He was humming a good song. Also in the video, Jingming refers to himself as Singer Di, and says that he accepts the company's offer to collaborate. Liu Di received a message from the system that Jingming is a student at a second-rate art academy. The guy realized that he would be able to get Jingming out quickly. The protagonist jokingly told Jing minutely that he admired him and offered to make a pact. Jingming replied to the protagonist that he could get him an autograph or a photo with him as a souvenir. Liu Di put out his cigarette and said they needed to agree on what would happen if his die and wasn't real. The protagonist offered Jing a minuet that he would break his left or right leg if he cheated. Jingming was very angry at such a suggestion from a guy. He asked the man how dare he. Another guest of the meeting told the protagonist that he had already been shown the video and still continues to argue. Mrs. Wen told the boy that he shouldn't worry about the performance. She suggested that he go and help Mr. Tu with the equipment. The protagonist replied happily and cheerfully to the girl that he agreed. Liu Di decided not to continue the conflict. He turned around and headed for the exit. He added that he would look forward to the evening. The protagonist slammed the door behind him as he left. Everyone present was silent. Liu Di, just like the girl told him, arrived at the building where the equipment and Mr. Tu were. The main character told Mr. Tu that he was jealous of him. He's always calm as water. Mr. Tu asked with calm interest the boy why he was freaking out. Liu Di replied frankly to Mr. Tu that things were very confusing in his life. Mr. Tu told the boy that he is an adult and has a calm character. However, Liu Di is still young and must fight for his life. The boy said raspily that he didn't dare do that in response to Mr. Tu. Mr. Tu told the guy that he remembers what he was like just a few years ago. Mr. Tu remembered how the protagonist worked 3 jobs without sparing himself. Mr. Tu said that his favorite saying is if a man is ruthless, he must be ruthless. If one wants to run, one must run. The protagonist strongly wanted something from himself to answer Mr. Tu. Mr. Tu asked the fellow strictly if he was the young man from the bank whom the War Office was looking for. The boy laughed softly to himself. He said he was dizzy and would go to bed. The guy took hold of the door handle, and he was ready to leave. Mr. Tu wanted to say something back to him. The protagonist was standing at the door. Mr. Tu told him to remember something important. Mr. Tu said profoundly that a man can defeat anyone but cannot go against his heart. Liu Di turned around and happily replied to Master Tu with a smile that he understood him. The protagonist consisted of himself near a tree. People were passing around him. He pondered over further actions. Guy got a message from the system that the number of connections to the Gemini program had exceeded 400 million in 8 hours. Liu Di asked Mo Tongyi's assistant if this information was true. Thoth confirmed and said he had just updated the group interest chat feature. Mo Tong reported that they now have about 3,000 chat rooms with different hobbies. Virtual Assistant has analyzed who among the infinite number of people can join chat rooms. The user wrote that thanks to the app, she was able to find many like-minded people. Another user wrote that he won't be able to stop using this app. Another user wrote that he has been looking for people who collect expensive fur for many years. Liu Di thought to himself that once the interest groups of people were formed, they would be able to conduct advertising integration into each of the communities. At the same time, a meeting was taking place at the White Bear Company headquarters. Director Li sternly asked his subordinates if they had figured out who was behind the Gemini app. The secretary told him that the owner of the company is Disan. His company is unprofitable without investors and assets. Mr. Li carefully studied the documents the secretary showed him. The director went to Vice President Shi and told him to buy $10 billion worth of new equipment. The vice president told Mr. Li not to worry because they will absolutely overtake the competition. At the same time, the protagonist was standing on the street when his acquaintance Ajia approached him. The former salesman told the protagonist that he rocked hard. Liu Di replied to his friend that he had only recently started practicing sports. Ajia, on the other hand, is looking worse and worse. The protagonist and his friend approached the building. Ajia wondered if the firm would be here. The rent is very expensive in this building. The protagonist told him to go boldly with him and find out everything. Liu Di walked boldly toward the building where his office was, and Jia shouted at him to wait. Entering the building, the guys stepped into the elevator. It started to take them up to the highest floor of the skyscraper. Jia was very surprised. He couldn't believe that Liu Di had chosen the highest floor. In the elevator, they went up to the right floor very quickly, and when the scoreboard lit up the number 87, Liu Di said that they had arrived. The elevator doors opened and the floor with their office opened up in front of the guy's gaze. Jia was very surprised by what he saw. He was just an ordinary store clerk, but now he was in a huge office. Jia saw a huge room with a large number of people and furniture in front of him. In the end, Ajia said he found it hard to believe that anyone could afford such a fancy office. Liu Di told Ajia that their company is working with internet and messaging. They launched their first mobile version yesterday. The protagonist told a friend that it was his responsibility to train staff to maintain the app on a daily basis. He promised to provide people and money. Ajia was very amazed. He asked the protagonist again if he was joking. Liu Di replied to him that he meant what he said. He told his friend that they had to be strong. Ajia interrogated him with wonder at what it meant to be strong. The protagonist said judiciously that they need the strength and patience to refuse at any time to a firm that wants to buy them. Ajia told his friend that it's good that he has the makings of an entrepreneur, but bad that he has braggadocio. Liu Di told his friend that by then there would be various companies to work with. Jia hugged the protagonist and told him cheerfully that he was so weird after all. And Jia made a suggestion that they move into this office completely first before discussing anything else. Liu Di said that he will be the CEO behind the scenes and will only count money. Officially, Jia will be in charge. Jia said surprised to his friend that he would end up taking all the useless positions. They walked on and on through the office. Jia hugged his friend and said that he was good at everything. The protagonist and his friend continued to walk around and explore the office. The two of them went into one room where there was a huge fan on the ceiling. Ajia was very surprised. Ajia asked his friend if he had gotten into any trouble behind his back. He added that he was very worried about him. The two of them went up to the roof of their office building. They had a view of the city. Liu Di told his friend that he was the only person he trusted. Ajia told the guy confidently that if Liu Di called to him with a request, he wouldn't hesitate to run to his aid. Ajia asked the protagonist if he had enough money. The former salesman had 150,000 in savings and was willing to share it. Liu Di told him to keep his savings. He sent him a letter about the company's plans and affairs. Jia asked the protagonist that they had already passed 3 floors and where exactly their company was. Liu Di calmly told him that all the last 3 floors, including the roof, belonged to them. The former salesman was very impressed. He wondered what kind of company it was that they had 3 floors. Liu Di told him that their company is called Creator, and their main product is the Gemini program. Jia was very amazed by everything he had just heard. He couldn't even believe it was real. Liu Di told his friend that if he became CEO, he needed to work on his image. And Jia told the guy he was right. Now he needs to buy a good suit for himself. The protagonist told his friend that he had a free villa and a nice car. He promised to give Jia the car and the keys to the house. Jia was very surprised. He asked his friend if he did not use the villa and the car. The two of them were still on the roof of the building. Liu Di took his friend under his arm and told him to go with him. A little later, the protagonist was riding in a car. He was carrying Mrs. Wen with him. Mrs. Wen told the boy to stop here now. He asked what was wrong since it was still a long way from home. The girl told him there's a banquet in 4 days with important guests. Her father wants Liu Di to go with her. Miss Wen said that the guy wears casual clothes, but it might not be suitable for the banquet because some people would look down on the guy. They were standing outside the best clothing store in Shanghai. The girl said she wanted to give the guy a nice suit. Liu Di thanked her for worrying about him. He said there was no need to buy him a suit. The girl told him he can't be principled and she wants him to dress formally. The guy called his boss Mrs. Yan and thanked her for her concern. He added that strong people don't need to show their real status. Then they continued to ride together in the car. The girl was silent. Mrs. Wen told the guy that she wanted to give him a gift and hoped he would accept it. The girl opened the box and the guy was very surprised by such a gift. In the box lay an expensive stone, green and round in shape. It shone and glowed all around. The guy told the girl that the stone looked expensive. He asked if she wanted to bribe him with it. The girl was startled to tell the guy that he's been looking strange lately. She felt as if something had happened to him. The guy said relaxedly to Mrs. Wen that she was talking nonsense. The girl told the guy that he can't see anything anymore because of his sadness. She will hope that Liu Di will glow like the stone. The protagonist wondered if this girl had a good side. The guy told the girl that she was very annoying, so stop saying such things. The girl resented it. As planned, a large banquet began in the Yan family's manor. Mr. Yan called for the butler. He replied that he was here. Master instructed the butler to take a closer look at Liu Di. Master liked the main character. The butler replied calmly that Liu looked completely official and calm today. Mr. Yan said he felt sorry for the main character. This is the first time Liu Di has attended such an event. The system told the guy that the Gemini app had been downloaded 800 million times. The Jichu community has over 720 million users. Liu Di was very happy. Everything was going according to his plan, and the more people in the Gemini program, the better. The system indicated that the application has a 90% traffic rate. The company's growth in the international market amounted to 100%. The success of the company under Liu Di's leadership was described by various media. Their company was described as a promising company. As a result, Di-san and Zhang Ajia's company was able to quickly and successfully enter the top. The protagonist thought to himself that this was only his first steps in the business world. Just then, a big black jeep drove up to the estate. It was Sumin's arrival for the banquet. Ziming's assistant opened the door of the car he came out of and headed towards the manor. Ziming was not by himself, he came with his buddy named Qiancheng. Mr. Yan looked very surprised at the arriving guests. He was silent. Ziming and Qiancheng, the two of them, respectfully greeted Mr. Yang. One of the arriving guests approached Sumin and greeted him. He said that he had been waiting to meet him. The protagonist was standing nearby. Mr. Yan called out to him. Liu Di came over. Mr. Yan pointed at the people who had come and said that they were the sons of his late friend. One of the guests pointed at Ziming and said that he was the head of an entertainment company. The guest told Sumin to have a good time here. He also wanted Sumin to consider his proposal. Suming slyly said that he might consider the offer. The guest introduced Qiancheng and said that he was the founder of the international travel firm Secret Path. Mr. Yan said that Ziming and Qiancheng were his daughter's classmates. They gave her a hard time back then. Qiancheng revealed that after giving up the girl, he went on a big trip. Qiancheng turned to the girl and said that he was no longer the same person he was. He offered to be her boyfriend. Mrs. Wen pointed at the main character and said that she wanted to introduce him to them all. Qiancheng said there's no need for introductions. They know that it is Liu Di who is Mrs. Yan's benefactor. Qiancheng called the protagonist a scum who does nothing. Liu Di remained silent. He had a very strong desire to say something rude to Qiancheng, but he held back. Qiancheng said with a chuckle that there was no need to chop from the shoulder. They have a long life, they will not be in a hurry. To prove his good intentions, Qiancheng extended his hand to the protagonist. Liu Di squeezed Qiancheng's hand with all his might. He grimaced and said that he was in pain. The protagonist answered him calmly that he simply did not calculate his strength and does not shake hands with girls at all. Qiancheng was very furious. He didn't even know what to say to the protagonist. One of the guests said that Qiancheng had never been to the manor and he offered to show him around. After that, Qiancheng along with Ziming stepped aside to inspect the manor. Mr. Yang said that the young people are still young and have already gotten excited because of some stupidity. Liu Di replied to Mr. Yan that he was absolutely right and they still had a lot to learn. Mr. Yan told the protagonist that he deserved to be a member of the Yan family. He said he would support him in everything. In the Yan family's mansion, an extensive banquet continued with many tables and guests. One guy told Qiancheng that he was very aggressive. He lost his temper when Mr. Yan was present. The guy went to Qingming and Qiancheng. He told them that they should unite to get rid of Liu Di. Suming and his friend were very surprised. They asked what it meant to unite. The guy told them that Suming and Qiancheng's main job was to prevent the protagonist from speaking out. Suming will have to announce that he's chosen the guy's offer. He in turn will add another 200 million to D&D's fee. Ziming asked uncertainly if he would have any problems with Yan Wen. The guy told him there would be no problem. Mr. Yan really only trusts Liu Di. That's when the guy told Zimin that when the time comes for the protagonist to lose everything, he'll have a better chance of getting close to Wen Wen. Suming liked the sequel very much and told the guy he was right. The guy told Qiancheng that he was promising him success in financing his company. Qiancheng was very happy with such words, but he was still very angry at the protagonist. The guy told Qiancheng that it was normal to be impatient. The most important thing for all of them now was to crush Liu Di in strength. Qiancheng turned to the guy and called him Fung Yu. He thanked him. Qiancheng said confidently to Fung Yu that he along with Ziming would do whatever he told them to do. At the same time, the main character was chatting with Madame Wen. She was drinking wine from a glass. Liu Di heard someone call out to him from the side. It was Qiancheng and Fung Yu. Qiancheng turned to the protagonist and apologized for being rude to him. Qiancheng told the guy that he was a good friend of the Yan family. For that reason, they should be polite to each other. Liu Di laughingly replied to Qiancheng that it was normal for rich boys to not treat each other with respect. Qiancheng was very angry at such a response from the protagonist. He couldn't contain himself. The butler came over to Mr. Yan and said that Mrs. Nan would be arriving any minute. Mr. Yan asked who Mrs. Nan was. The butler said she was the daughter of a famous man from Kyoto. Mr. Yan was very surprised by this information, and he thought for a moment. The butler said that Mrs. Nan said that her father should not leave the capital now. For this reason, she decided to visit General Haishan, Chief Duan, and Mr. Yan. Mr. Yan said he understood. He had to prepare for the meeting. The Yan family's banquet was still going on. Many people were outside. Ziming turned to Fung Yu and said that they now needed to turn the protagonist into a laughingstock while Mrs. Nan was here. Qiancheng said that Mrs. Nan has great influence in politics and business. Wen Yu told him that this was the reason why they had to perform at their best. It would help them climb the career ladder. Fung Yu said that they should use the main character as one of the stepping stones to success. Fei Yu told the guys to greet Mrs. Nan and show themselves in the best light. At that time, an automobile pulled up. The servant opened the side door for the lady. A young, beautiful, and red-haired Miss Nan stepped out of the car. Nan greeted Mr. Yan. She asked if he was offended that she had come uninvited. Mr. Yan said he was honored to see Nan in this place. The girl asked Mr. Yan if Haishan and Duan had already arrived. Mr. Yan replied that these guests were still on their way, and he wanted to introduce the young men who had arrived to Mrs. Nan. Mrs. Nan told Mr. Yan that he could call her Ruo, and at this time the guys were silently looking at the girl. They didn't know what to say to her. Fung Yu thought to himself that this guy is on stage, and it's a great shame. In the end, Fung Yu walked up to the young mistress and slipped his hand into hers. He said his name was Wu Yang. Madame Nan looked at Fung Yu very distrustfully. She did not give him a hand. Fung Yu thought to himself that Miss Nan is a very powerful person, and he wanted to carelessly touch her hand. Mr. Yan introduced for Ruo and his daughter Yanqing Wen. The girls said hello to each other. Just then, something very much caught Madame Nan's attention. She turned her gaze to the side. Mrs. Nan looked at the main character very carefully. She recognized him. To herself, Mrs. Nan whispered clearly the name of the protagonist, called him DR. Liu Di was drinking champagne at this time. He noticed Mrs. Nan had arrived, and he decided to approach her. Liu Di, standing beside Mrs. Wen, introduced himself politely in front of Mrs. Nan. Mrs. Nan thought that the boy had given his real name. She decided not to reveal his identity. Out loud, she greeted him. Liu Di looked at the arriving girl and thought how could she be so cute and lead the Haley Mafia group. The protagonist stood across from Mrs. Nan. They looked at each other piercingly. Mrs. Nan thought to herself that only Daiaru could have that kind of energy. The people around him noticed that something was wrong with Mrs. Nan. Fung Yu asked if she was all right. Just then, Fung Yu suggested that Miss Nan take a little rest in the gazebo. Mrs. Nan said as friendly as possible that she would like to chat with Liu Di. Ziming told the lady that Liu Di is not a member of the Yang family. He's just an ordinary driver. Mrs. Nan was surprised at such words. She turned around to find the protagonist. She noticed Liu Di standing in the distance by the fountain drinking champagne. Mrs. Nan thought that the protagonist had no interest in her. Then Mrs. Nan turned to the boys and said that she accepted their invitation. Just then, several vehicles with people drove up to the Yan family's estate. A man in military uniform came out of one vehicle. It was General He Li. The general stood silently by his car and he waited for Duan's arrival. Suddenly, the general heard someone call his name from outside. It was Duan. He asked the general if he could tell him what was wrong with his phone. The general told him to be a little quiet around here. Duan called the general Mr. Lau and asked him how he found that boy. Haley sternly questioned Duan Guheli, who had encroached on his army. Mr. Yan came over. He greeted the general and Mr. Duan. He told them that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Duan told Mr. Yan that he was the host of this evening, and there was no need to make a scene. Mr. Yan replied to Duan that if one remembered their entire friendship from beginning to end, it was a sin not to make a scene. Mr. Yan told Duan that he was their guest of honor today. The general and Duan noticed a young Miss Nan. The general asked Duan if this girl was Mr. Nan's daughter. Mr. Yan said that he had no idea that so many stars and old friends could gather in his estate. Mrs. Nan greeted Haishan and Duan. She said that her father sent her here to pay her respects to the older generation. The general told the girl that he was grateful to her for remembering them. Duan told Mrs. Nan that she had grown up a lot. Fung Yu watched the girl's conversation with the men from afar. He thought to himself that although the girl was young, she was talking on equal terms with the big shots. In the distance stood the main character. He watched Madame Nan chatting with Duan and the general. Liu Di thought to himself how the two generals would react when they found out that He Li was Miss Nan. The general told Old Man Yan that his estate really stirs the imagination. Duan told the general that Shanghai is not only a beautiful city, but also full of talented people. Duan was drinking beer from a can. He wanted to say something else, but something off to the side caught his attention. Duan couldn't believe his eyes. He noticed the guy he was looking for on the sidelines. Duan was extremely surprised. He looked at the protagonist and didn't know what to say. The general turned to Duan and asked what he was doing. Duan was heading towards the protagonist at this time. The general came up behind Duan and grabbed Duan by his clothes. He told him to stop right now. Duan demanded that the man let him go immediately. He wanted to go to Liu Di's house. The general rudely told Duan that he wasn't even showing him respect. Mr. Yan intervened in the conversation. He did not understand the reason for the conflict between his guests. The general told the cunning Mr. Yang that there were many young people at the banquet. He asked him to introduce them to him. Mr. Yan was in complete agreement. He told the guests that he would do so. Mr. Yan led General Duan over to a group of young boys and said that he would introduce them. At the front of the group stood the main character. He looked at Duan and the general carefully. Duan asked the protagonist slyly what he does in his spare time. The general wondered where the guy worked. Tsu Ming said that he felt as if Liu Di was the main character of the evening. The general told Mr. Yan that they hadn't played chess together in 10 years. Mr. Yan said cheerfully in response that we should fix it. The general told Mr. Yan that if he won, he would have to fulfill his request. Just then, a loud clap was heard among the crowd. It was Fei Yu clapping his hands. Fei Yu said they still had time before lunch. There are many interesting places in the manor so they can take a walk. Ziming said that he had heard somewhere that Fung Yu was a former archery champion. He said they should find an archery range. Fei Yu immediately answered him not to even start talking about it. Then Fei Yu said that he had heard that Ziming was an expert equestrian, and Tiancheng was one of the country's best marksmen. The estate has a shooting range and stables. They walked together as a whole group to the stables, and there were many horses. The boys heard around them the neighing of very thoroughbred and expensive horses. Ming pointed to one horse and said that it was born in the mountains. It has very hard hooves and is the dream of any experienced rider. The protagonist calmly approached the horse as if nothing had happened. He was not afraid of it and stroked it. Ming told the boy to be careful, for the horse has a dangerous temperament. Fung Yu added that the horse had been living at the manor for a long time, but no one had been able to ride it yet. Ming said that he had ridden that horse and it was cool for him. Liu Di went directly to Ziming and told him to show his skill. Ming felt awkward. He didn't know what to do, but there were many people around. Ming said that today was a special day, because Mrs. Nan had come to visit them. He added that he would do his best to put on a show for her. Ziming excitedly approached the horse. First he stroked its muzzle. After that, he decided to saddle the horse. He put his foot in the stirrup and climbed on. Very soon, Ziming was already deftly and confidently sitting on the horse and holding its reins. The surrounding people were very surprised. They even clapped their hands with joy. Ziming commanded the horse to run forward, and he was ready to ride. The horse did not react in any way to his commands. It just stood in the middle of the stable. Ziming shouted rudely to the horse why it was not moving. He once again commanded it forward. The surrounding people also started yelling for the horse to move forward. All this amused the protagonist very much, and he decided to intervene. Liu Di walked over to the horse and told Zimin that he had 10 seconds to get off it. Ming was very angry when he heard the protagonist say that. He said that he was just starting to gain momentum. Suddenly, the horse became furious and jumped up to throw the rider off. Very soon, Ziming found himself thrown to the ground. He was very upset. The surrounding people were very surprised and frightened. They didn't know how injured Zimin was. Ziming, rubbing his bruised arm, turned to Fung Yu and said that the horse had some problems. The protagonist said that Ming personally has all the problems. The horse is a purebred Mongolian warhorse, and he will never bow to mediocrity. At this time, the horse gave a very loud roar. It did not like the rider, Ziming. Liu Di asked Ziming whether an idiot like him with a weak spirit had decided to control a warhorse. Ming asked the guy why he was saying such things. He explained that the horse was simply wild and ill-mannered. Fung Yu turned to the protagonist and said that if he was so smart, he could try to ride a horse himself. The protagonist accepted the challenge. He confidently walked over to the horse. Behind him, Madame Wen watched anxiously. Liu Di told everyone present that the horse did not need to be re-educated. Ming didn't believe such words. He said it was all nonsense. Liu Di walked up close to the horse and began to look at it closely. The horse was also looking at the protagonist in response. The guy was able to hypnotize it. It wasn't long before the horse was quietly crouching on the ground beside the protagonist. Mrs. Nan looked at the boy and said that a gentleman is a gentleman. At the same time, Madame Wen wondered what kind of person the protagonist was. Fung Yu said that the main character had already beaten him in archery, and here he was again in the spotlight. Tian said that shotgun shooting is a game played by rich people. Poor Liu Di had never played such a game. Tian made the decision to motivate the protagonist to compete. A little later, the whole company arrived at the shooting range in a friendly manner, and there were plenty of targets. Tian said very confidently that he had learned archery from an early age. Tian pointed to the side with his hand. There was a launcher with circular firing capability. Tian said confidently to all present that he was only 3 hits away from the title of Olympic champion. The girl said that this machine shoots symbols in different directions, and you have to hit them in a couple of seconds, which is very difficult. Tian turned to the protagonist and said that he was good at archery, and he would be able to shoot a gun just as well. Fung Yu said that the protagonist had a natural talent and asked him to participate. The system reported that the subconscious merger with the Olympic champion flying saucer shooter was complete. A little later, the system reported that the shooting skills process was complete. A guy got a message from his virtual assistant. He indicated that he had been away for a couple of hours because he had an update. Mo Tong was overjoyed. He helped his master get the skills he needed in time. The protagonist thought to himself that he was looking forward to seeing his virtual assistant grow up. He also added that the weapon skill was unnecessary. Mo Tong informed the guy that he was doing everything just for him. He added that he needed to continue the update. Liu Di felt how he received reliable and timely help from his virtual assistant. The protagonist said enough idle musings and walked confidently to the stand with guns. Liu Di confidently loaded the gun. He told Tian to get ready to fall face first into the mud. Tian told the assistants to start 2 cars each firing 30 plates. Liu Di was loading cartridges into the gun at the same time. He said that he would shoot first, and Tian could prepare himself. The protagonist picked up the gun and took bold aim. The people around him looked at him attentively. Fung Yu looked at the protagonist and decided that he couldn't possibly be a master marksman. Liu Di shouted to the assistants to launch 4 throwers that would randomly directionlessly shoot out 70 plates. Tien was very amused to hear the protagonist say that. He told the guy that he was holding a double-barreled gun, not a machine gun. The assistant near the car turned to the protagonist and asked him if he had misspoken, because it was the first time he had heard such shooting parameters. The protagonist was completely confident in his abilities. He shouted boldly for the assistant to begin. The machine started firing plates in different directions very quickly. Liu Di started shooting at the plates quickly, and professionally he was shooting them all down. The protagonist hit all the targets very accurately. After that, he ran out of ammunition. The guy stopped shooting. He needed to reload his gun and threw the casings away. After that, the protagonist took the new cartridges in his hands with professional movements. Liu Di threw new ammunition into the gun and quickly cocked it to fire. The guy took aim. He was ready to keep shooting so professionally. Shots were fired. The protagonist was shooting very accurately as before. All the plates from his shot were blown to pieces. He shot without error. The people around him were very amazed and surprised because of how quickly the guy got the job done. Tian was angry and shocked. He thought to hell with this competition and decided that Liu Di was not human. The loud shooting at the shooting range attracted the attention of Mr. Yan and his guests. At this time, Yan was playing a game of Go with the general. Duan watched their duel. The general wondered who could shoot so fast. He felt that the shooter was twice as fast as the riflemen of his royal guard. The general walked over and took a closer look. He could clearly see who was firing the gun. The sight of the protagonist infuriated the general. He called him a petty parasite to himself. The general told his opponent, Mr. Yan, that he would put everything on the line to win the game. At the same time at the shooting range, the main character broke the last plate with an apt shot. Liu Di finished the shooting contest. He won. There were many shell casings lying around. The barrel of the gun from the shots heated up to such a state that the protagonist was able to light a cigarette from it. Liu Di said they were so slow he decided to go see them. Madame Wen looked anxiously after the guy who was walking away. The girl was excited. She barely audibly called the protagonist by name. During this whole time in the gazebo, Mr. Yan continued to play Go against the general. The general very much said smugly that his opponent would definitely lose this game. Mr. Yan was very surprised to hear such self-assured words. He sat silently. The general voiced his request to Mr. Yan and asked the latter if it was not very polite to ask for such a thing. Duan thought to himself that a superior had to yield even in a party, so any requests were meaningless. Mr. Yan said surprised to the general that he had not even imagined that he would ask him for anything. The general said that he was jealous that the Yan family had a lot of talented people. Mr. Yan said the general is contradicting himself. First he let Tizi go and now he wants to bring him back. The general said he's not interested in you now. He needs another man now. Mr. Yan was very surprised. He asked the general exactly who he wanted. After a brief pause, the general pointed his finger at the man he wanted. Mr. Yan is very surprised. He realized that the general was pointing directly at Liu Di. Mr. Yan looked at the general and asked the general if he wanted the protagonist to go with him. Mr. Yan told the interlocutor that Liu Di is very weak physically. He can't be of any use to the general. After a little thought, the general said judiciously that if the protagonist is weak, then his soldiers are not men. The Go game was coming to an end. The general said he had closed and therefore the victory was his. Then the general said that the winning combination is called the Tale of 9 Dragons. Mr. Yan was very indignant, and he shouted to the general that he couldn't do that. They didn't even notice when the main character came to their table. Liu Di took a white pebble from the basket. At this time, the guy placed a pebble on the game board. The general and Mr. Yan watched silently. Mr. Yan was very surprised by the actions of the protagonist. He didn't know what to say. Liu Di told the general to take another look at the black's disposition. The general looked carefully at the Go game board. He studied the position of the pebbles. Here the general asked with great interest of the lad what the move was called. Liu Di cheerfully replied to the general that this move is called collapse. Duan told the guy that he pretended to be a sheep so that the opponent himself would walk into his mouth. The general said that his defenses have been breached in the field of play. Because of this, he will only have to fight to the end. Mr. Yan said judiciously that the game is a game, but lunch may already be ready. At the banquet, it was time for lunch. There was a table in the building with many different dishes. Mr. Yan said that it was very rare to dine together with representatives of the Heishan and Duanhua families. He invited everyone present to enjoy the meal. Tianshen and Ziming sat silently at the table in their seats. They hadn't started eating yet. Mr. Yan turned to Tian and Zimin and told them not to be shy. He also told the Wen girl to start. Wen stood up and said that their company will soon produce a large volume of medical equipment for home use. To promote their products, they hold charity events with the participation of pop stars. The girl added that any profit is out of the question. She hopes that all the guests will support them with investments. The people present were silent. They thought about the words they had heard from the girl. Someone wanted to speak up. He raised his hand up. It was Fung Yu. Fung Yu jumped up and shouted, "Did Wen really think that they were doing charity here?" After that, Fung Yu told everyone present that they had made a contract with Mr. Liu. Ziming said happily that due to Mr. Liu's great popularity and influence, they would definitely be able to raise the popularity of the project. Fung Yu turned to Mr. Yan and called him father. He added that there was nothing illegal about this proposal. For this reason, they should agree to it. Madame Wen also wanted to address her father. He sat in silence. At the same time, the main character was completely absorbed in the process of eating. He did not interfere in the conversation. At the same time, Tian decided to voice his support. He clapped his hands together. Tian said that he already had enough experience in doing business, so he fully agreed with Fung Yu. He added that his company will also enter the market soon. Duan was surprised to hear such talk. He thought to himself that every day brings a new discovery. Mrs. Nan said Joe is just a small antique dealer. That's why you can't offer them anything. Tian replied to Mrs. Nan that she was very humble, and if they were doing business in the same field, he would definitely not be able to compete with her. Mr. Yan said Miss Nan has an incredible mind. At this time, the main character decided to intervene in the conversation. He said it was all garbage. The words said by Liu Di made the people present very angry. Fung Yu threateningly asked the protagonist what he had said. The guy reiterated again that he thought the three guests were just trash. Fung Yu angrily asked the guy how dare he say such a thing in public. Liu Di told the interlocutors judiciously that on the outside they had succeeded, but on the inside they had long since rotted away. Tian asked angrily at the protagonist who he was to judge them and their successes. Liu Di put his fork away. He said he didn't feel like talking at all. The guy then added that there are always clowns who talk nonsense. Liu Di told the guests judiciously that courage and manliness are needed in youth. Liu Di asked the audience if they wanted to put on a show. This was supposed to be the funniest event of the year. Fung Yu told the protagonist not to talk nonsense and why he decided that. Madame Wen and the others present silently and with interest followed the conversation. Liu Di told everyone in attendance that he was helping to organize the charity event. He said he wanted to hold the event on the waterfront near Huitian Square. Fung Yu asked sternly at the guy how dare he compare these ruins on the shore to Huitian Square. Tian told the protagonist that he had hit his head again and was talking nonsense. Liu Di said there was nothing better than holding the event amidst completely destroyed houses and scorched earth. Tian was angered by this response, and he didn't even know what to say to the protagonist. In the end, Tian asked Liu Di for Liu Di to provide evidence. The protagonist told his interlocutors that in an hour they would be 500 million in debt. Mr. Yan tells the protagonist that he is frustrated and doesn't understand him. Tian calmed down a bit and said that Liu Di needed to go and get some air. The protagonist told everyone present that he wasn't done yet. After that, Feng Yu became extremely angry and pounded his hand on the table. Irritated, Feng Yu told the guy not to dare to insult Miss Nan. Tian and Ziming stood there watching. Tian said that he wondered what Mrs. Nan would say to all this. The protagonist liked this. He decided to approach Mrs. Nan. Liu Di stood beside and across from Mrs. Nan and told her what about her. Mrs. Nan looked at the protagonist with joy and confidence. It was obvious that she liked him. Mr. Yan turned to the protagonist and said that he didn't call Miss Nan here to tell her anything. The protagonist was completely calm. At that time, he took a cigarette out of the pack. Tian told Liu Di that the latter could use to check his nerves. What happened next very much surprised, shocked, and angered Tian. There was the sound of a fire being lit in a lighter. The protagonist lit it. At the same time, Liu Di didn't light his own cigarette. Mrs. Nan gave him the lighter. Liu Di took a drag on his cigarette and then let the smoke out. He looked at the people around him calmly. The guests were surprised and couldn't understand why Mrs. Nan helped the guy light up. Tian asked Madame Nan why she gave the guy a light since he is just an ordinary driver. Miss Nan replied to the audience that there was no particular reason, just that the protagonist wanted to smoke. Mr. Yan was very surprised. He couldn't believe that Miss Nan had called the protagonist Mr. Mrs. Nan said that giving a cigarette to Liu Di was a small thing to her. If a guy asked her to risk her life for him, she wouldn't disobey. Mr. Yan asked the girl directly what her relationship with Liu Di was. Mrs. Nan said that Master didn't give her permission, so she won't say anything. Suddenly at the same time, the phone rang in Tian's pocket. This caused Tian to look away from everything that was going on and answered the phone. The interlocutor told an agitated Tian that everything was gone and they would go bankrupt. Tian was very much surprised. He asked his interlocutor how such a thing was even possible. Tian heard what the person he was talking to told him about the Gemini app. One of the communities in Gemini had just exposed them. It was publicized that their roots were destroying the ecology and taking over the local people's land. Tian was very much annoyed. He didn't understand how some communities' statements could take a company out of the market. The interviewee said that their competitors have not only released exposure on them, but have been able to create over 100 new itineraries for travel, and they are completely free. Tian dropped the phone out of anger. The caller kept saying that they were in very big trouble. In the end, Tian was very annoyed. His company had suffered great losses. The neighbors at the table looked at Tian with interest and bewilderment. They did not understand what had happened to him. Suddenly, Tian pointed his finger at the protagonist and said that he had done it all. He asked what he had to do with Gemini. Mrs. Nan was surprised that Tian called the protagonist by the name Liu Di. She knew him as Di-san. Liu Di said happily that this is a very big coincidence. His former classmate Zhang Tianjia is the CEO of Gemini. Tian looked menacingly at the protagonist and kept saying that it was all his fault. Liu Di replied to Tian that he was doing more than he could handle. He thought to himself that it was enough for him to think and do. Tian got very angry. He jumped up on the table and headed towards the protagonist. Tian shouted menacingly to the guy that he had nothing to lose and would go down with him. At this time, Madame Nan intervened in the conflict. She hit Tian with a punch. Madame Nan became resolute in her defense of the protagonist. She hit Tian with all her might. After being hit hard, Tian very quickly flew aside from the table. Liu Di said that they were finally alone. He added that it was time to compete and the concert was starting. Fung Yu was very much surprised at such words. He didn't know what to expect right now. Ziming was very much amazed at the way Madame Nan had dealt with the pull. He waited to see what would happen next. Mr. Yan told the protagonist that his eyesight was failing him. He asked the guy not to neglect it. After that, Mr. Yan bowed to the protagonist. Liu Di replied to the old man that he shouldn't. Mr. Yan asked the guy what he was going to do next and if he still wanted to stay in the Yan family. Liu Di told Mr. Yang that everything has a beginning and an end. He said he would leave when he was completely clean of evil. The general said he wasn't wrong about Liu Di. The guy turned out to be arrogant, bossy, and honest. Then the general said they were done discussing family matters. It was past time to talk about the affairs of the country. At the same time, military vehicles began to arrive at the mansion. They were full of armed men. Gradually, military vehicles began to surround Mr. Yan's estate. Armed men jumped out of the cars and they all ran into the banquet hall together. Very soon, a great number of men with weapons had gathered in the room. They stood around the table. The general said he had orders. All those he cares about must obey him unconditionally and join him in the army. Duan told the general that he was very tough. He actually moved his troops here. The general rudely said that it was because of his ruthlessness that he was able to be where he is now. The general turned to Mr. Yan and told him to take his guests out of the room. They shouldn't listen to adult conversations. Mr. Yan called the butler over. He told him to take the guests out right away. Everyone present began to get up from the tables. They headed for the exit of the room. Mrs. Nan turned to the protagonist with fright. He told her that everything would be all right. As a result, there were almost no people left in the room. Standing next to Mr. Yan was Liu Di. The protagonist turned to the general and said that he had just lost this game. The general replied to the guy that he was already able to subdue those brats. Liu Di replied very calmly to the general that he would never become his soldier. Duan turned to the guy and told him to become a real policeman and not some kind of soldier. The general didn't like such words. He told Duan not to start. The general turned to the protagonist. Liu Di told him that he was here. The general told the boy not to make him beg. Liu Di was confused and didn't know what to say in response. Then the general told the guy he appreciated what he was doing. He wanted Liu Di to do an important task that could get him killed. The protagonist was very surprised. He did not believe what he heard from the general. Duan intervened in the conversation. He said that his government had a project that would be the death of any ordinary person but not Liu Di. After a little thought, the protagonist said he wanted details. The general told him it's not that fast. All data is a state secret. This turn of conversation did not please the protagonist. He told his interlocutors that he would not listen to them anymore. The general replied rudely to the guy that he was already starting to annoy him. At the same time, a guest was approaching the gates of the mansion. He was an unattractive old man. When the old man came close to the entrance, one of the armed men said that the facility was guarded and that he should go for a walk elsewhere. The old man calmly told the soldiers that he would first show them something and then let them decide whether to let him in or not. The soldier asked the comer with interest what he wanted to show. The old man took a large gold medal out of his pocket and showed the guard. The soldier was surprised at this. He saluted the old man and called him petty officer. The old man said cheerfully that he got the reward when he treated soldiers on the battlefield. He asked the guards to let him in to see his old friend. The soldier told the old man to wait and he would report his visit. At the same time, the general was getting more and more mad. He told the protagonist that he would go with them whether he wanted to or not. The old man stood not far away and watched the conversation for a long time. He called out to the general, calling him Hei Chi. The general turned around and called the old man senior. He asked what he was doing here. Duan and Mr. Yan were surprised by the old man's arrival. They called him Mr. The protagonist also looked at the old man. He greeted him and called him Mr. The old man noticed the guy too. He called him Ju. He'd seen him recently. Then the old man sat down at the table. Duan poured wine into his glass from a large bottle. The old man sat in silence. He paid no attention to the wine and was thinking about something of his own. Liu Di turned to the old man and called him Mr. Tu. He added that he had prepared the best quality tincture for him. Mr. Tu told the boy that he always knows what he needs. He told the general that Liu Di always helps him clean the hospital. No one can take the boy away from him. The general told Mr. Tu that he had a decree to enlist for service. Such words from the general amused the old man. Mr. Tu refused. Mr. Yang told the general that they didn't commit a crime. Yan Hongxin doesn't know anything. The general turned to old man Yan and asked if he thought that the protagonist was a simple man. Duan and Mr. Yan looked at the general. Yan asked if he didn't think so. The general asked Mr. Yan if he knew the level of training of his soldiers. Mr. Yan replied that he did. The general said that a couple of his soldiers got into an altercation with Liu Di. He was able to take down a 6-man team in 43 seconds. The general pointed his finger at the protagonist and said that his soldiers were knocked out at the hands of Liu Di. Mr. Yan was very surprised. He didn't believe what he heard from the general. The general said calmly that he had many of his soldiers around him today. The general then added that if his soldiers wanted to engage in battle with the protagonist, they would not be worthy opponents for Liu Di. Then Mr. Yan carefully and silently looked at the protagonist. Already afterwards, Mr. Yan said very sadly that he was just blind. Mr. Tu turned to the general and said he understood what he was trying to accomplish. Mr. Tu said he knows very well what his country needs at this moment. The general turned to Mr. Tu and said that he already knew all the innermost secrets. Duan told Mr. Tu that he was asked to return to service in the R&D department. Mr. Tu said that everyone is responsible for the ups and downs of his country. He asked the general to take his side. The general was very surprised. He asked Mr. Tu if what he said was real. Then Mr. Tu looked at the protagonist and said that he would take action if necessary. The general humbly said that he was willing to follow all of Mr. Tu's orders. The general turned to the protagonist and asked him if he wasn't interested in what they were talking about. Liu Di replied to the general that he wanted to not as experienced as him, but he had already guessed their plans. The general was very surprised. He asked how such a thing could be possible. The guy said that if Mr. Yan is already here, he's definitely related to Yinzi Company. Liu Di said that if you reveal the country's personalities and plans on the internet, you can create a resonance in society. Mr. Yan was very surprised. He began to think about all the information he had heard from the guy. The general was also very much surprised. He looked at Mr. Tu questioningly. Mr. Tu told everyone present that he had nothing to do with it. Liu Di looked at his companions and said that judging from their faces, he was right. The protagonist told Mr. Yan to be on guard against Ouyang Fung Yu. Mr. Yan said that Fung Yu was born into a poor family, so it's understandable that he would have plans for the Yan family business. He wanted to ask Liu Di to keep Fung Yu in check. The protagonist was very much surprised by such a request from Mr. Yan. The protagonist thought to himself that he could benefit from Mr. Yan's request. Liu Di said confidently to Mr. Yan that if Ouyang Feng did another rash act, he would immediately send him to hell. Mr. Yan replied to the guy that he was wrong, and in reality, it's not like that. Liu Di said that if we recall the incident at the bank, all the actions were reckless on the part of the attackers. The general told the guy that he was very observant. He told the protagonist that not taking part in their program would be very unwise. Mr. Tu said that about the military company and its transformation, he guarantees that Liu Di will not leak information. Mr. Tu turned to the boy and said he didn't have the energy to discuss it anymore. He asked him to take him home. Liu Di replied in agreement. After that, the protagonist and Mr. Tu walked towards the exit. The general turned to Mr. Tu and said they could discuss the plan in detail on the way home. Mr. Tu stopped. Without turning around, he said not to be annoyed. This answer made the general very upset. He wanted to say something to Mr. Tu after he left. At the same time, the guests of the banquet were outside, surrounded by a crowd of armed men. Ziming asked what was going on here. Tian told him that the armed soldiers had surrounded the Yan family house. Liu Di was left alone with the two bosses. Fung Yu said that he is sure Liu Di is simply an arrogant kid, and he himself created all these problems. At the same time, the doors of the manor opened, and everyone waited to see who would come out. The main character walked out of the door along with Mr. Tu. They silently headed onward. The soldiers standing nearby silently greeted Mr. Tu all in unison. Qian, along with Jiming and Fung Yu, stood and silently watched everything that was happening. The three of them watched as the main character headed towards Miss Nan. Liu Di told Miss Nan that he had a couple of ideas to improve her business, so they'll be in touch. Mrs. Nan joyfully answered him in agreement and called him master. The protagonist, along with Mr. Tu, were walking alone on a country road in the mountains. Liu Di was very grateful to Mr. Tu for his help. He asked the boy if he wouldn't come next time, if the enemies would be able to stop him. The protagonist was very surprised by such a question. He asked the old man what he was talking about. Mr. Tu told Liu Di that he has many talents. For this reason, he wants to help the boy establish ties with the state. Then the protagonist realized that Mr. Tu wanted to help him. and he thanked him for it. The sound of cars was heard from behind. The boy and Mr. Tu moved out of the way. A white Mercedes pulled up beside them. Liu Di and Mr. Tu continued walking. A general looked out of the car window. He offered Mr. Tu a ride. The old man paid no attention to the general. He told the protagonist to go faster. A column of cars passed by the boy and Mr. Tu, and they drove forward further. Mr. Tu told Liu Di that the latter was able to happen all his wildest expectations. The protagonist defeated General Hei's soldiers. Mr. Tu told the boy that when he rescued him, he realized he had a very special body. The kid's genes are capable of self-improvement. The main character said shyly and cheerfully that he was just lucky. The boy asked Mr. Tu where he got the artificial eye he had given him during their first meeting. He said he didn't remember exactly. He recalled that he had found him in some hospital. The old man's answer made the boy very happy. He replied that everything was fine. Old man Tu decided to say something to the protagonist. He put his hand on his shoulder. Mr. Tu told the boy that he was lucky to have such talents from God. He said that when the country needed him, he should take that responsibility. The protagonist was very surprised at such a request. He didn't even know what to say to the old man. After thinking for a bit, Liu Di told Mr. Tu that he would do his best. At this time, Ziming, along with Tian and Fung Yu, were standing together on the road in the forest. Tian was very irritated and angrily pounded the tree trunk with his fists. Tian said to himself that because of the main character he became bankrupt, so he won't lift a finger to help him. Feng Yue asked Tian what he could really do. Does he really not understand who is behind the people? Tian told his interlocutor with malice that he would ask his mercenaries to deal with the people. Feng Yu thought to himself that all he had to do was give the idiot some bait, and he would immediately swallow it. Suddenly the guy's attention was attracted by a very loud noise. They heard shots and explosions. They looked down. They saw that some kind of shooting was continuing on the road. Military vehicles were stopped. They were attacked with gas. After this, automatic shooting of bullets began from afar. The soldiers were very scared. They did not know where to shoot back since they did not see the enemy. There was a huge explosion. The soldiers were scattered to the sides by the explosion. A ninja in a black suit rushed past the soldier. The ninja very quickly approached the white car where the general was sitting. Immediately, the ninja prepared to attack the car from the side from the passenger seat. After this, the ninja began to take out the car door with a strong blow. People in Mr. Tu watched all this from afar. He said that the ninja wants to kill Xiao Heizi. Mr. Tu asked the main character if he could stop the ninja. The guy received a message from the system that such speed and strength are not characteristic of ordinary people. The main character decided that it was time to act. He prepared to jump down the hill. Ludi pushed off with all his strength and jumped down so as not to waste time. The main character flew down. He needed to stop the ninja as soon as possible. At the same time, the ninja was already breaking down the side door of the car, and the general was sitting there. The ninja threw the broken door far back behind him with all his strength. Then the ninja noticed a ring of fire in front of him. This was the general's protection. The general resisted. The ninja continued to attack him with all his might. The ninja decided to stab the general with a knife. He noticed the danger and began to defend himself. The general fought off the ninja attacks. At the same time, the main character landed on the roof of the car. Without wasting time, Liu Di jumped on top of the ninja and he noticed the guy. The main character threw the ninja far to the side with maximum impact force. After a strong blow, the ninja flew away and disappeared. The general watched all this. The system compared the physical characteristics of the main character and the ninja girl, and the similarity was 95%. The guy looked in surprise after the missing ninja girl and asked the virtual assistant if it was her. Ziming, along with Tian and Fung Yu, watched the entire battle from afar. Field of this, Tian said in surprise that he barely had time to blink an eye. Ziming asked Tian if he really wanted the main character to end up with him in heaven. Tian fearfully said that he did not say such a thing and takes his words back. Tian ran to the car and said that he should not mess with the main character. After the battle, the general approached the main character. He asked Ludi if everything was okay. The main character has already come to his senses. He said that everything was fine with him. The man looked at the general with great interest and asked persistently whether he knew who wanted to kill him. General Hei said thoughtfully that big shots are often assassinated. Judging by the outfit of the perpetrator, he belonged to an international assassination organization. At that time, Old Man Tu came over. He told the general that he now owed his life to the protagonist. General Hai cheerfully greeted the elder. He was glad to see him. Afterward, the man said to Liu Di that he would always remember how he saved his life. One of the soldiers reported to the general that they had searched the entire perimeter of the forest, but the killer had gotten away. The general said the incident should be hushed up quickly, and the press should not know about it. The soldier said he would do everything. Afterward, the warlord told his companions that they had become even stronger. The elder replied to the general that he knew what would help them speed up. Liu Di asked the general if he thought it was strange that such an incident happened in the Yan family's estate. The man replied surprised to the guy that Brother Yan could not even think that he would be assassinated. Liu Di said cheerfully to the general that his calmness in such things is admired by the younger generation. The general told the guy that he was assassinated because someone wants to stop the Chinese military's new program. The man said thoughtfully that there was no need to waste time looking for the killer, they should rather spend more time advancing their research. Soon enough, the protagonist returned back to the Yan family's villa. The guy was watching a video of a fighter on his computer. He wondered if this was the transformation of a human being. Liu Di decided to himself that the matter in the Yan family was much more complicated than he could have imagined. When the protagonist was standing in the lobby, a girl named Wen came out to him there. Guy asked Madame Wen where she planned to go today. The girl replied that the protagonist was now the guest of honor of the Yan family. Because of that, she has no right to ask him for anything. Liu Di walked close to the girl and said with interest that he had something to say to her. The girl told the guy calmly that she wanted to visit Mu Yang Psychological Clinic. After that, the guy and the girl left the villa building and headed towards the car. The protagonist and Mrs. Wen were traveling in a car through a large city. The girl sitting in the car was obviously nervous. She kept clicking her pen. The protagonist asked the girl calmly what she was worried about right now. Madame Wen looked at Liu Di with great interest and said that she wanted to finally find out who he was. After a little thought, the girl said she wanted to find out how wrong she was about the guy. The protagonist hesitated. He continued driving the car without answering the girl. Mrs. Ayan told the guy that there was nothing wrong with him not wanting to discuss it. She was quite aware that he had the right to ask him about such things. Liu Di thought to himself that a person's true identity is a very interesting thing. Breaking the long silence, the girl asked the guy if he was joking about the event then. Liu Di asked Mrs. Wen with interest if he had ever joked about such serious topics. The girl told the guy that if she loses, she won't blame him for it. Without turning around, the protagonist replied to Madame Wen to buy him lots of snacks. The girl was interested. She timidly asked the guy why he wanted appetizers. Liu Di turned to the girl and said that the snacks were for children. Otherwise, it would be hard to persuade them to participate in the performance. The girl asked if the guy really wanted to allow disabled people to participate in the event. Liu Di confirmed that too. Mrs. Wen was inspired to suggest to the guy to have a children's party or some contests for the kids. Soon the protagonist and his companion drove up to the gates of the clinic where the girl was heading. When the girl got out of the car, she asked the protagonist to keep her current itinerary a secret. Liu Di turned around and cheerfully told her that everyone has bouts of madness. He promised to keep it a secret. Mrs. Wen gathered her thoughts and prepared to go out to see the psychiatrist. The girl went to the door of the building and pressed the bell. She waited for the doctor to come out. The doors of the clinic opened, and a young girl in light white clothes stepped out. The girl who came out was very surprised to see Liu Di and Madame Wen beside him. At this time, the system informed the guy that the girl looks educated but is actually quite wild. The system says the girl's name is Li Mu Chang. She's a 26-year-old hypnosis expert. Li Wu-chan walked over and cheerfully greeted the Wen girl who had come. After that, Li asked Wen what kind of guy was standing next to her right now. Wen told the Li girl that an acquaintance of hers named Liu Di had come to visit her. Girl Li was very much surprised to hear the name of the protagonist. She wondered. The guy greeted the girl as if nothing had happened without any emotion. Just then, Li's girl licked her lips, thinking of something of her own. The doctor lady invited guests to come into her office. The guy was sitting on the couch under a big fan. Liu Di looked at the psychiatrist's office with interest. There were books and some medicine vessels on the shelves. The guy sat calmly and motionless on the couch. He was waiting for the Wen girl to return from the reception. Unexpectedly, the protagonist was disturbed by an urgent message. The boy in the system said to the main character that he even flinched at the loud sound. The boy reported that he found something interesting on that wild doctor's computer. The protagonist was surprised. He asked excitedly at the system what kind of things the wild doctor did. The system told the guy that Dr. Li's records have a lot of information about Liu Di. The card index card about the protagonist reported his personal skills and habits. After a detailed analysis of the main character's behavior and personality, the doctor created a special hypnosis plan. Liu Di asked the system boy to monitor whether there were any records of Yanqing Wen. The system reported that the Wen girl had been coming here at least 3 times a month for the past 3 years. The boy from the system reported that according to his information, the girl Li Mu Chang is a serious doctor. The main character was very surprised. He couldn't understand how this girl could be a serious doctor. Liu Di was sitting in the waiting lobby, and after a short pause, Dr. Li came out to him. The girl Li came out of her office and sat across from the protagonist. She brought a cup of water with her. The doctor said that Mrs. Yan had recently experienced very severe psychological stress. The doctoress looked at the protagonist and told him to let Madame Wen rest for a while. Liu Di thought to himself, and he was silent for a long time and looked at Dr. Li. The guy remembered to himself that for the first step of hypnosis, you have to make a person's brain experience. The doctor told the protagonist that it must be tiring to be Mrs. Yan's driver. She suggested him to relax and have a good rest. After that, the girl put her hand on the guy's shoulder. She told him that she could guide him into a state of deep sleep and complete relaxation. Liu Di remembered to himself that hypnosis masquerades as deep sleep. The doctoress then pressed a button on the remote control of the air conditioner. Li's girlfriend approached the main character and told him she was offering him a big opportunity. The doctor told the guy that for Miss Yan's sake, she would give him a new experience. Dr. Li asked the protagonist with surprise if he was okay. Liu Di, trying to hold back and not show emotion, said he was fine. The doctoress suggested that the guy lie down now as he would be comfortable. The protagonist got flustered. He wasn't very comfortable with Li's girlfriend sitting on top of him. At this point, the doctor pulled out a gold-plated watch she needed to induce hypnosis. The doctor told the guy to focus on the pocket watch. Liu Di looked at the watch carefully. The girl was holding it on a chain. Dr. Li smiled and prepared to put the guy into hypnosis. The protagonist watched carefully. As the watch on the chain in front of him swung, he realized that the girl had begun hypnosis. The system gave the guy a message that the merger with the subconscious was complete. The system told the guy that his consciousness had completely merged with hypnosis. The doctor told the main character to listen to her voice. She said that his body relaxes and he feels comfortable. The girl told the guy that he was now walking on warm sand and the sun was shining brighter than usual. The doctor proclaimed that she would count to 3, and the guy would trust her completely and tell her all the secrets. Whether the girl was looking carefully at the protagonist, she started counting down from the number 3. The doctor continued counting backwards. She reached the number 2 and then 1. When the bill was over, nothing happened. Liu Di took out a cigarette and lit it. The protagonist smoked and looked silently at Dr. Li. The hypnosis had no effect on him. The girl looked at the guy with great surprise. She realized that she wouldn't learn anything from him. The guy asked Li Muchan frankly if she was a virgin. Dr. Li was not at all embarrassed by the question from the protagonist. She said that her first time was in a university dormitory. It was also later with patients at the clinic. Liu Di's response caught the girl off guard. He yelled at her to stop. The guy asked the girl why she created a hypnosis plan for him. The doctor said that Mrs. Wen wanted to know the secret of the main character, but she changed her mind last night. The doctor herself wanted to know everything about Liu Di. The guy asked the doctor why Yanqing Wen go to her clinic. The girl replied that Miss Wen suffers from strong personality syndrome, and that pressing a ballpoint pen helps her fight the disease. Liu Di asked the doctor's office how his boss was feeling right now. The doctor said that the patient subconsciously feels that her true personality is being enjoyed, and it's coming out. The protagonist inquired about where Mrs. Wen's illness could have come from. The doctor said that the disease can have 2 causes. It could be fatigue or a congenital defect in the genes. The protagonist said he hoped the doctor would help his boss. Liu Di wanted to say something else important. He put out his cigarette in the ashtray. The protagonist told the doctor not to make any plans for him. Guy added that Liu Di's poor mind had been hypnotized successfully. Then the protagonist clinked his lighter to indicate that the conversation was over. Dr. Li was very surprised. She expected a different outcome from the session. The protagonist stretched and said happily that he had had a very good night's sleep. The doctor told the guy he needed to rest and she had something else to do. After that, Dr. Li came to the next room where Mrs. Wen was. The doctor woke the girl up and told her excitedly that she was able to hypnotize Liu Di. Girl Wen was very much surprised by what she heard Dr. Li say. Mrs. Wen shouted sternly and angrily to the doctor that she had asked her not to do that. The doctor asked the girl if she didn't want to know what happened to the main character. Wen asked without much interest what happened to the protagonist. The surprised doctor said that Liu Di had more than 80 personalities. Then the doctor said excitedly that the main character is a big pervert. Mrs. Wen called the doctor Sister Moon and asked her to stop making jokes about her. Dr. Li tells the girl that she is her doctor and why she doesn't believe her. A little cheerful, Wen asked her interlocutor what about the identity of the protagonist. The doctor lady calmly said that Liu Di is an ordinary person who knows many wonderful people. At this time, Mrs. Wen's phone rang. She decided to pick up the phone. Mrs. Wen picked up the phone and listened to the message from the caller. The news that the girl had just heard shook her badly. The girl Wen ran out to the room where the main character was and said that they had to go back because something had happened at home. Liu Di calmly said that he could guess that the reason for their summoning was because of senior sister Yan's accident. The main character said that the older sister may have been in a car accident, or there was a fall resulting in injury. Mrs. Wen was very surprised. She asked the boy how he knew something had happened to her sister. Liu Di said calmly that he noticed a darkening of energy in Big Sister's body. It foretold disaster. The girl didn't like that answer. She told the protagonist that he had gone back to his old ways. After a short pause, Mrs. Wen said that yesterday her older sister was attacked by bandits near her house. The protagonist cheerfully replied that if he went, it wouldn't do his sister's injury any good. After that, Mrs. Wen turned around to the guy and told him that she would go alone. The girl turned around and walked out, slamming the door. The guy decided to address the system. The system boy showed the only route without a scanner between General Hai's assassination site and Yan and Wen's older sister's mansion. Liu Di pondered. He decided that this route most likely hid the weapons of big sister Yan and Wen. The boy thought we should get one of the generals to catch the mistress. He could easily intercept her on the spot. The door opened and Dr. Li entered the room. She was carrying a treat on a platter. The main character was happy. He liked the fact that they also served him fruit. The doctoress took the guy's hand and said he was the most beautiful man she'd ever seen. Liu Di thought to himself that he should have said during the hypnosis that he was the man that Li's girlfriend could never win over. The boy in the system reminded the protagonist that the doctor likes to solve puzzles and investigate. Dr. Li smilingly suggested to the guy that they add each other as friends in the Gemini program. Liu Di held out a smartphone to the girl. He said he agreed to her offer to support his own app. Dr. Li and the guy carried smartphones to each other. They added as friends. Dr. Li asked the main character why he signed up for D-San. Isn't he afraid that the creators might ban his account? The protagonist said that if his account gets banned, all he'll have left is to boil in an iron pot. The doctor laughed. She told the main character that he was really funny. The guy got a text message on his phone at the time. He was notified of a new find. Liu Di rejoiced as the new information would not be superfluous to him. The guy turned to the smartphone and told him to keep it a secret. They'd pull out that ace after the concert. Fung Yu was sitting and browsing the news on the internet. He saw the news about the exposure of the Gemini app. The guy was surprised. He said that Su Ming was able to organize Singer D's concert at the charity event as well. A video of young Fung Yu has been broadcast online identifying himself as the vice president of Inzi Group and responsible for Singer D in concert. Fung Yu said that at 20 o'clock in Huitian Square, D's concert will be held and admission is free for everyone. After that, Fung Yu made a few more announcements, and the audience listened to him attentively. Internet users were waiting for the concert. They couldn't believe that D would actually come, and they were ready to do anything to get to his concert. After D announced the concert and left a message on the internet, it went viral. Su Ming's boyfriend was very excited. He kept thinking about Singer D, and Ziming stopped and pondered. He did not understand how D and was able to send the message. At the same time, preparations for the concert were going on in the Yan family's estate, and the workers were carrying instruments. At this time, Mrs. Wen was watching the music equipment being moved in her yard. 2 movers were carrying the piano. Due to the carelessness of the movers, the piano slid sideways and fell off. The boys looked fearfully at the fallen piano. They were afraid it might break. Mrs. Wen looked carefully at the fallen piano. It seemed familiar to her. The girl looked and thought that in front of her stood the forgotten piano from the basement. Miss Wen remembered that the instrument is similar to the piano from Dai's video, and the girl decided to herself that this piano was no longer playable. Mrs. Wen walked over and shouted to the movers to wait. The girl walked over to the piano and lifted the lid. She wanted to check how the instrument played. Madame Wen stood and pressed a few keys on the instrument. The girl noticed to herself with surprise that the piano was well tuned. The movers turned to Miss Yan and told her not to delay the delivery. Near the stage gathered a huge number of people. They all waited for the concert and chanted the name of the singer D, and standing behind the stage were Ziming and Fung Yu beside him. They silently listened to the crowd's shouts. At the same time, news of a future concert spread throughout the big city. The protagonist in a building on the outskirts of town was also preparing his concert. At this time, Mrs. Wen was sitting near the stage and Mrs. Nan was sitting next to her. A large banner appeared with a message of thanks to Sister Yan for such a gift of a concert. Miss Nan and Miss Wen thanked their viewers and admirers for their support. 2 boys came up and they wanted to address words to Mrs. Wen. The boy looked happily at Mrs. Wen and said that she should be applauded after the concert. The girl liked such words. She agreed to the boy's proposal. Afterwards, the Wen girl thanked Madame Nan for her visit. Mrs. Nan replied that she admired the girl for the good deed she had done. Nan then clarified that she wasn't interested in the state of the stage. She had come to see the beautiful man who would sing. Madame Wen was surprised at this answer. She didn't even know what to say to her. Suddenly, 2 of her maids approached Madame Wen from the side. The girl turned to the maids Kai Kai and Xing Xing and asked why they were here. The maids told their mistress fearfully that they had barely found her, and they had almost lost their way. One of the maids told the mistress that they really wanted to see the beautiful singer D, and they also came to support her personally. Madame Wen hugged her maids lovingly and thanked them joyfully. The girl turned around and walked towards the stage. She told everyone that the show was about to start. One of the boys told the girl that Liu Di would definitely wait for her. There was a huge crowd gathered near the wall, all chanting Di's name, and the host came on stage. He welcomed everyone to the benefit concert of Singer D, and the people in the crowd were overjoyed. They were non-stop loudly repeating Di's name, and the host asked fans to invoke their deity named D, and at the same time, from behind huge puffs of smoke, the long-awaited singer came on stage. The singer came out and stood silently on stage. The audience greeted him with applause. The fans were ecstatic. They called D and their god. They were barely restrained by security guards. The singer took the microphone in his hands. He prepared to perform a song for the audience. The guy was happily singing a song about the day the waves rose from the depths. The audience stood and listened joyfully to the song. Gradually, the people moved a little away from the stage. The audience noticed that there were some problems with the sound and they couldn't understand what was wrong. At this time, at another location on the outskirts of the city, the protagonist decided to perform himself. The maids turned to Mrs. Wen and said that they needed to invite another performer to the stage. Kai Kai and Shin Shin were carrying a boy with glasses in a wheelchair. The boys were very excited. They stood beside Mrs. Wen and waited for the main character's performance to begin. The girl was satisfied and cuddled the children. After that, she wanted to know when Liu Di would arrive. Mrs. Wen called and wondered if Liu Di would make the children wait so long for him. At this time, the main character prepared to start the concert. He turned on the lights near the piano. The guy sat down at the piano that was set up on the roof and got ready to play. Liu Di began the concert by leisurely strumming the keys on the instrument. The main character started singing a romantic love song loudly. The audience standing nearby at the concert wondered who was singing. They realized that Di on the stage in front of them was a fake. The real singer is the one singing next door. The audience all gathered and headed en masse in the direction from where the main character's voice was heard. Madame Wen was very surprised to hear the noise of many people walking. She even thought it was an earthquake. Madame Wen stepped out onto the balcony. She began to carefully survey her surroundings. The girl noticed a huge crowd of people walking past the house where she was. People were walking and everyone was chanting in unison that they were heading to where Di and... People approached the building in droves and began to surround it on all sides. Mrs. Nan shouted to her subordinates to reinforce the guards and protect the children and the stage. The protagonist at this time continued to sing a song. Its sounds blurred through the surrounding streets. All the people and even the children stood still mesmerized as they listened to Liu Di perform the song. The boys were very happy and pleased. They were touched by the lyrics of the song, in which the main character reported that he would not be afraid. The audience was surprised. They couldn't realize whose fabulous voice they were hearing. At this time, Old Man 2 was sitting at his home on the couch. He knew that the protagonist at this time would be performing. The elder drank the wine and said cheerfully for Liu Di to move forward. The main character stood on the roof and said that this hospital that treats sick children does not have for existence. He also added that attention is human nature and kindness. Liu Di, standing with his back to the audience, said that he would like to thank everyone who came with good intentions. At the same time, the protagonist launched a brown box with his hand from the spread of the brown box into Madame Wen's window. The girl was very surprised. She didn't realize what kind of gift had flown into her window. The girl took the box in her hands and hesitated to open it. Liu Di, standing on the roof, said that his sister does good deeds and he respects her for it. When the girl looked up at the roof, the guy had already managed to quickly disappear. The audience was surprised to see the girl. They recognized her as the heir of Inji Group and belonging to the Yan family. The maids asked the surprised mistress if she knew Di, and personally, they asked her to open his gift. Madame Wen opened the box. It contained a large green pearl inside. The maid told the mistress that she was very jealous of her because she had received a large pearl as a gift. Madame Wen said in response that it was not a pearl, but the Eye of Immortality. After thinking for a bit, the maid said that she had heard the word Eye of Immortality before. The maid asked mistress if that was the bead she was holding for the photo shoot, with which she had given millions. Mrs. Wen told the maid that she was right, but she had just recently given this pearl to the protagonist. The maid asked the girl why singer Di and threw this pearl into her hands. The maid asked Kai Kai if she thought Liu Di was the singer Di. The girl was greatly surprised. She couldn't understand how the main character could be a singer Di, and Madame Wen strictly told her maids to keep their mouths shut and keep the secret. The girl looked up at the rooftop where the main character had been a while ago. She said that Di wouldn't want others to know his real identity. Madame Wen asked the maids why it was that they hadn't suspected anything about Liu Di before. The maids Shin Shin and Kai Kai were very intrigued. They asked with interest why they didn't suspect anything. Miss Wen said that they and the main character are from completely different worlds. Shin Shin said that she was now the most popular streamer since Liu Di was here. Wen's girlfriend said that she is now absolutely certain that it was the main character in the underground casino who was losing tens of billions of yuan. Kai Kai asked Shin Shin if they could forgive Liu Di for what they did before. The girl replied that maybe the main character doesn't care about them at all. The maids told the mistress together that they were now very eager to go home. Mrs. Wen asked the girls with interest why they wanted to go home. The maids replied that they should move all of the protagonist's belongings to the best room on the 5th floor. At the same time, the maids immediately ran to fulfill what they had in mind. The girl hesitated. She hadn't realized Liu Di was going to move. Madame Wen looked long and carefully at the pearl box in her hand. At this time, Wen Yu was standing by himself on the empty stage and all the spectators had left. Fung Yu was annoyed because a lot of money had been spent on the concert. He said everything was ruined. Then the guy got angry. He decided that the protagonist was responsible for the failure. Wen Yu shouted angrily that if he was going to go down, it would only be with the protagonist. Fung Yu then looked up at the city from above and shouted out where Lu Ziming was wearing now. At this time, Ziming ran down the street along with another guy. Ziming ran down the street with all his might along with his colleague. They needed to escape as soon as possible. Suddenly, the guy slipped and fell. He couldn't get up on his own. The boy motioned to Tsu-min to help him up. Ziming shouted angrily to his comrade that he didn't care about him now, and it was now every man for himself. Tsu-min was carrying a big bag. He said that $300 million would be enough for him to live happily. Suddenly, the boy stopped. He was surprised to see that he was blocked. Standing outside was Madame Nan, surrounded by a group of her subordinates. The girl asked quietly at Ziming did he really think that he would be able to escape. The guy got really pissed off. He decided to turn around and run back. Ziming turned around and noticed another group of Miss Nan's underlings standing behind him. The girl importantly told Z minutely that he had better master something. Trying to appear as calm as possible, the guy said he knew nothing about any dispute. Mrs. Nan said strictly that she wanted to deliver a message from her master. To add importance to the moment, the girl raised her finger and began to relay the message. The girl Nan said that Ziming owed her master a right leg. At that time, her wards rushed at the boy. Tsu-min wanted to escape, but he couldn't. His payback caught up with him on the city streets. At this time, reports of last night's concert were going around the big city. People learned that Inji Group lost $500 million, while people saw the mysterious singer D and... At the company's head office, the meeting participants demanded an explanation from Vice President Yang. Fung Yu said without any embarrassment that he didn't need to explain anything since he had eyes. The leader of the meeting said sternly to Yang that he had a very bad attitude towards work, and he had disappointed him very much. The chairman said that it was very good that Miss Yan's charity concert was held, and it saved them from a lot of trouble. Fung Yu said it was all Liu Di's fault, saying one thing to his face and doing another behind his back. Such words very much displeased the leader. He thumped his hand on the table. The chairman told Yan to forget about running the company for now. He told him to go and take care of his eldest daughter. The guy got to his feet and said he'd quit since management decided to suspend him. Fung Yu turned around and headed towards the exit. He silently walked out of the meeting room. One of the participants said that the guy's behavior was out of line. Another person said that Mr. Yan caused the problems himself and did not admit his guilt. Someone asked Mr. Yan to put his son-in-law in his place. Mr. Yan stood up and calmed everyone present at the meeting. At this time, Fung Yu entered the elevator. He was preparing to go downstairs in it. The guy pressed a button in the cab to make the elevator start going down. Fung Yu went down the right number of floors below and the elevator stopped. The guy met a coworker who said the old guys in management made his life too difficult. Fung Yu said he doesn't care what old people think of him anymore. At this moment, he wants to defeat the protagonist. After that, the guy went to the medical center. He wanted to take the drug there. The doctor told a very excited guy that it wasn't a good idea. The medic reported that the drug was only recently created and there have been no trials. The guy asked the doctor impatiently what percentage of the probability that the surgery would be successful. After a little thought, the doctor judiciously said that the probability is not more than 10%. Such figures pleased Fung Yu. He said that 10% probability was enough. The doctor added that even if the operation is successful, it is against the law and humanity. At this time, Fung Yu's subordinate asked the doctor why he was refusing to operate on his boss, even though the drug had passed initial testing. The guy asked the doctor why mention all of humanity at all. Fung Yu called Dr. Li professor and said that he had always believed in him and his abilities. Then Fung Yu told the professor that he could get world recognition through the operation. The doctor thought about it and analyzed everything he heard from the guy. He agreed to the surgery. Half an hour later, Fung Yu was intentionally tied to the hospital bed. Everything was ready. Professor Li told the patient that even now the outcome of the surgery is unknown. The guy told the professor impatiently that he was talking too much and told him to start. The doctor brought a large syringe of the drug to the guy's arm and injected him. Professor Li and Fung Yu's handmaiden watched the results of the operation carefully. After the drug, Fung Yu's heart rate and blood pressure jumped up sharply at once. Violent convulsions began to run through the lad's body. He could barely contain a scream. Fung Yu screamed very hard after consuming the drug. A suppressed scream came from him. Yang's subordinate asked the professor if his boss was about to die. Professor Li said he's noticing a completely new reaction. Yang's physique is different from normal people. The doctor added that if the operation was successful, Fung Yu's physical form would surpass all possible expectations. At the same time, Yang's condition became more and more complicated, and he was shaking very violently. The handyman, in a frightened voice, decided to inquire what was wrong with his boss. Unexpectedly, Fung Yu opened his eyes. He had fully recovered from the surgery. Yan felt a huge surge of strength. He was even able to tear the straps that bound him to the bed. The subordinate was very surprised by his boss's strength after the surgery. Yu Feng stood up and said confidently that he now understood how it's like to be a god. Professor Li was also very much surprised by the results of the experiment. He looked at the results of the sensors. The doctor said the medicine worked well for Yang. His muscles strengthened by 500% and his body strength increased by 300%. Fung Yu realized that there was no point in wasting time. He got dressed and jumped off the bed. The doctor told the agitated lad to get back to his seat. He was obliged to check all his powers. The boss's sidekick reminded him that they had to get revenge on the protagonist first. Yan said slyly that there was no need to rush. He wanted to make Liu Di pay the highest price. As he was leaving the doctor's office, the guy grabbed the concrete wall and it completely crumbled from his grip. At this time, a meeting was going on in the office of Inji Group Corporation. One of the meeting participants suggested discussing the company's performance for the month. At this time, Fung Yu suddenly broke into the study. He glared angrily at those present. The chairman asked fearfully at Ouyang's doing something and whether he had lost his mind. The guy came to the table and said it was a success. The second phase of drug development had been completed successfully. Mr. Yan was very surprised. He didn't understand how such a thing could be possible. Fung Yu's assistant came over. He brought the documents to the chairman and said that he should take a look at them. Fung Yu said in a confident voice that he had tried the medicine on himself and it worked. The man said excitedly to Ujanu, "Something is acting recklessly. It could have been that the experiment would have failed." The guy said he understood, but he risked everything for the company. The participants of the meeting rejoiced at the news that the problem they had been unable to solve for 2 years had disappeared. They will have stable cooperation with the military industry. Fung Yu said they could invite General He to the lab to see the results of their work. General He arrived by helicopter, accompanied by several soldiers. After arriving, the general entered the elevator in the building with the soldiers. The general rode silently in the elevator. He was excited by the news, but didn't show it. The general asked Mr. Yan if he was sure of the success of the experiment. Mr. Yan, after a short pause, told the general that he would understand everything when he tried it. The general turned to his soldier named Grizzly and told him to hit a special machine gun. The soldier was in no hurry to get to the mat and began to warm up for a harder punch. Then the soldier accelerated and prepared to crush the machine gun at once. The Grizzly threw the maximum punch he was capable of. The machine analyzed the force of the blow and showed that the soldier gets 200 points. Mr. Yan said with surprise that Tian's organization is at a high level, and the strength of the soldier's punch is similar to the level of a world champion boxer. After that, Fung Yu decided to show off his abilities. He tossed his jacket aside. The guy accelerated and prepared to hit the machine with all his might. With all his might, Fung Yu completely crushed the automaton with his powerful punch. The apparatus could not even accurately determine the force of the impact. It failed. Mr. Yan said that Fung Yu's impact force is beyond the measurement of this machine. The general told Grizzly's subordinate to fight Fung Yu. He added that he wanted results. The soldier did not like the offer and was afraid for his life. Fung Yu told the general that there was no way his Grizzly soldier could be a worthy opponent for him. Then the guy slyly said that they could invite a person here who favored the martial ranks from the Yan family's manor. Mr. Yan asked Fung Yu, surprised to hear Fung Yu talking about the main character. General He told Mr. Yan that Liu Di is a strong fighter, and he would like to see him in a fight. Such words made Fung Yu very happy. He said that he completely agreed with General He. The protagonist was lying on the shore and looking up into the vast blue sky. Liu Di was resting on a large rock. He didn't realize that he was being watched. The analyst looked at the satellite video of the protagonist. The guy thought hard after what he saw. He smoked a lot. An expert asked how it was possible that their control system could be hacked. Another expert said that a hacker could control not only streetlights, but also loudspeakers. The analyst said it's been all night. They should have found the hacker or D, and the subordinate told the captain that they were able to figure out the hacker's IP address. The captain got excited. He said he wanted to catch the hacker himself. The subordinate timidly said that the hacker is now in Egypt, and at the same time also at the North Pole. The captain got angry and shouted at his subordinate not to joke about him. The subordinate showed the captain the laptop and said the hacker had left a channel for them to talk to him through. The captain walked over to the laptop and looked carefully into it. Messenger was activated. In Messenger, he read a greeting from a hacker for Captain Dongmin. The expert was very surprised he didn't know and couldn't understand how the hacker knew his name. The hacker apologized for causing a lot of trouble for the organization. He added that there were no casualties. The captain decided to respond. He threw everyone's notebook down and started rapidly thumbing through the keys. Captain Dongmin demanded of the hacker that he reveal his location immediately. All he saw in response was laughter. The captain got very angry. He even turned out the ashtray of cigarette butts. Dongmin then noticed the hacker forwarding him an archive of documents. The captain was very much surprised. He realized he had gotten something important. Kapitna read a message from a hacker who sent him information about a major money laundering case. The general wrote to the hacker that he would not forgive him for what he had done to General He's power grid. The hacker replied that no one would catch him. He signed his name as DC. The general was very much agitated by the large amount of information he had received. He even tapped his hand on the table. The man said excitedly that the hacker is Chinese and a fan of D, and the general received information about DC. He was a Chinese hacker of international level and very dangerous. The man decided that he must catch this hacker. He will fight him for the rest of his life. The protagonist, after a vacation near the sea, decided to return home. Liu Di picked up the phone and said that it was time to deal with Fung Yu. Suddenly, the guy noticed an incoming call. Yan Hongxin wanted to talk to him. The guy was still standing on the shore. He asked Mr. Yan what he wanted. Mr. Yan told the protagonist that they would be conducting an important experiment at the company, and he should come. Liu Di replied that he was now in the Wanhai area. He asked Mr. Yan to ask them to wait for him. Mr. Yan told the general that the protagonist would be with them in an hour. 10 minutes later, Liu Di was already there. He was taking the elevator to the right floor. The guy went up to the floor and got off the elevator where General Hai and Mr. Yan were waiting for him. The main character thanked everyone in attendance for waiting for him. The general asked with surprise at Mr. Yan how come the guy passed in 10 minutes. Mr. Yan asked Liu Di how he was able to pass the access control. 200 million was spent on the security system. Liu Di replied that he was good at computers. He was able to hack into the system. The protagonist asked if he was invited here to defeat Oyan. Fung Yu was surprised at such words. He said that he could only dream of winning. The guy ripped off his clothes and yelled to the main character that he could beat him to a pulp. Liu Di absolutely calmly replied to his opponent that he himself was worthless.